Hey guys, tonight we're clocking in at the wrong end of the New River, 1930, where a tunnel is promised to bend water into money and you are promised to help. You want work that doesn't argue with the bank, and a foreman who speaks in pay slips instead of sermons. You get both. You also get dust that finds the seam in a scarf, the hinge of a lung, the sense that something quick is sliding ahead of your breath. They say the job is simple: drill, blast, muck, repeat. Dry as chalk, quick as hunger, and priced like salvation. Simple isn't kind though, and that's the test this story keeps giving. I'll walk you through the shift the way the shift walks through you, exactly, quietly, and with a hand on your back. If you enjoy this kind of misery dressed as history, go on and like and subscribe. There's more where this came from. And tell me something ordinary in the comments, where you're listening from, or your guess at the tunnel's smell on a scale of 10. All set? Grab your cap. Night comes early underground, and the air down there keeps its own books. Picture this: a cold boarding house at the dawn, tin roof talking, your boots asleep under the bed like dogs that won't fetch. Breakfast is fried eggs if your hands won last night's cards, cornmeal and gravy if they didn't. Coffee, the colour of creek water after a rain, hot enough to teach manners. Your shirt is heavy duck cloth gone soft at the elbows, cuffed stiff with yesterday's sweat. Your cap is the only part of you the wind respects. The company truck coughs outside, men, climbing in with faces that already look powdered. They ride with lunch pails, with pipe tobacco, with small pictures tucked in wallets. Someone hums a hymn and nobody joins, not because they don't know the words, but because singing this early feels like debt. Road dust follows the truck into the gorge, a little practice cloud that shakes itself awake around your knees. You pass town porches where people pretend not to watch, and a diner that sells pie to men who might not come back for dinner. The gorge narrows, the river gets its shoulders up, the day leans forward like a shove. At the site, the job brief is chalked on a board that never gets cleaner. Drill steel stacked like fence rails. Powder locked and counted. Caps in tins the foreman opens like candy he cannot afford to eat. You shoulder a jackhammer that twitches before it starts, a nervous animal that wants the wall more than you do. Hoses run to a compressor that wheezes like a sick house. Air rushes, but not the kind your chest wants. The engineers say keep it dry because dry cuts faster, and faster is what the ledger likes. So the bit bites, chews, finally sings. The face turns to sugar, to dust, to a fine glitter that wants to live in you. They hand out goggles that fog, and advice that doesn't. Masks. There's talk, there's shrugging, there's a joke about silk scarves in a coal camp. A whistle blows and the mountain opens its mouth. You step in like a guest who knows better than to sit down. You work by signals because voices die quick underground. One lamp circles twice, move back. 3 sharp taps, tamp the charge. Palm flat, fingers spread, freeze. It's a language you could trust more than talk, simpler than the arguments you left at home. You and the buddy you met yesterday fold into a pattern. He holds, you feed, you brace, he drives. You both take blame when the hole drifts. Sweat runs like a map to places you don't want to visit, stinging the cut on your wrist. The cut face brightens as if pleased to bleed, quartz winking, mica flirting, a bright lie that feels like progress. You seat the sticks, twist cap to lead, and press clay until the world seems full. Then everyone steps back the way church lets out, calm on purpose. The fuse fizzes a thought you can hear, through boot soles, through your teeth. Time stretches thin, then snaps. Rock thumps the ribs of the tunnel and a warm breath pushes past, friendly as a bear that forgot you lived here. Mucking is a different prayer. You grab the D-handle, toes set, and drag rock that still remembers being mountain. Cars roll on track so bent it has a personality. Wheels squealing like gossip at a window. Your gloves polished and thin as if learning manners you can't afford. Your breath shortens in tiny negotiations. In, maybe out, try again. Over by the heading, a man coughs the way old cars start, in chunks with a little hope between. He carries on because everybody carries on here. The boss steps in with a clipboard and a clean shirt that smells like soap and pipe smoke. A new smell in this hole. He counts cars, not ribs. He nods when numbers behave. He frowns when a wheel argues. Grit rings your teeth like a bad hymn. On the next pass you notice the dust is thicker than talk. A fine grey weather that keeps its own forecast and never predicts rain. Afternoon means more of the same, only louder. The compressor stutters, the hoses dance, the bit screams a note that scratches your nerves smooth. You aim the steel where the face shows sugar, bright pockets that promise faster progress and more dust as payment. Nobody wets the bore. Water makes mud. Mud slows cars. Slow cars make foremen visit with pens. Some men tie rags. Some cut sleeves into masks and trust to luck. One fellow swears by chewing tobacco because spit gives him something to measure. Another swears by prayer because breath is already spoken for. Your own trick is simple. Pace the hammer like a dance you learned from somebody you never met. You set, lean, feed, ease, and the wall answers with the patience of stone and the impatience of business. By quitting time you have dust in your hair, your ears, your pockets, and a cough you blame on the cold. Quitting whistle, and the tunnel spits you back into a blue evening that smells like oil and hot brake shoes. The truck rattles up to the boarding house where the porch leans and the pump gives winter water like a dare. You wash hands in a pan, scrub ears with a rag that turns river grey, then pour a dipper over your head and call it bathing. Shirts hang from a wire by the stove, cuffs white with the residue that no soap bothers to fight. At supper, you learn what pay means. A day rate that looks fine when someone says it out loud and looks smaller when beans and boots look back. The stew tastes of onion and a little luck. The cornbread tastes of iron if you chew slow. The store ledger sits behind your eyes even when you face the plate. A boy at the far table works a cough like a stuck hinge and laughs when it clears, because laughter is cheaper than medicine. You put tomorrow's socks near the stove, then tuck your cap under your cot for morning, already knowing dust will find it first. Night brings a chorus, snores cut by coughs, a bed frame speaking in nails, the small violin of mosquito under the sheet. Your bunk is a straw tick that crackles when you shift and sighs when you stop. Someone dabs liniment on a shoulder, and the room smells like menthol and horse. A lamp turns low, hiss soft, glass brown with fly specks. Letters shuffle out of pockets like birds that remember home. You read by thumb shadow, news of a sister's baby, a neighbour fined for crossing a fence, a price for butter that makes the room cluck. Your chest feels packed, not heavy exactly, just already spoken for. You cough into a handkerchief and call it common, the way men call weather by last year's name. Sleep comes in slices, thin at first, thicker, when the building settles and the wind forgets the corners. Somewhere a window sticks open and the night air feels clean as a lie under your tongue anyway. HR department, open window, shut hope. Hiring, if you back up a week, was a shack with a desk, a scale for powder, and a calendar that pretended time moved in squares. The man there looked past your age and into your hands, counting scars like references. He asked if you'd worked rock, not coal, and if your nerves had a sense of timing. You signed your name or made a good mark, and they gave you a brass check stamped with a number, the only grammar this place speaks. Crews formed like weather. You found yourself beside a boy from Carolina with a new moustache and an older man from Ohio who said little and lifted plenty. Some crews bunked up the hill, some by the river. The hill smelled of pine boards. The bank smelled of creosote and damp. People kept to themselves in a way that still noticed everything. The powder man kept count like a banker. The foreman kept distance like a pastor who'd learned not to ask questions whose answers travel slower than dust. Morning cycle, lay out the pattern, chalk X's on the face where the steel should bite, you shoulder the jack and brace knees, trigger twitching like a sparrow. The bit chews 6 feet if it likes you, less if the rock sulks. You ring the outside holes, centre cut to free the core, then lifters for the floor so cars can roll without muttering. Stemming clay rides your pocket in a tin. Caps sit quiet as coins until the twist and seat. No one wets the bore because wet throws mud and men. And because the timer in the boss's head keeps poor time when hoses run. The compressor hunts and finds its breath, lines shiver. The heading sings one hard note. You signal with a lamp and a hammer, 2 taps, 3 because torque breaks on this air like waves on stone. When the fuse spits, everyone steps back with the dignity of people who have learned to do dangerous things politely. You pick rock from your teeth, raise the shield you trust more than luck, and wait for the wall to speak. Dinner comes in pails with dented lids and names written in pencil. Cold biscuits wrapped in paper that now looks like office dust collected there on purpose. Salt pork cut thin enough to teach patience. A wedge of hoop cheese sweating under wax. Pinto beans that survived the shaking. Coffee in a bottle that learned heat at breakfast and forgot it by noon. Men sit on muckers, on rails, on whatever isn't moving, and trade bites like cards. A fellow breaks his bread and it throws a puff when it lands, neat as a magician's trick. Everyone smiles without moving their faces. Some rinse mouths at the barrel, some spit and call it rinsing. A few cough, spit again, then study the result with the blankness people use to look at hard truths. You wipe your lip and tell yourself lungs are big, that you only need patience. There's water in the river, not in the bore. Payday, and the office smells like ink, floor wax, and a little victory. The clerk thumbs wage books and pinches the corner of every bill as if testing ripeness, then pushes you a sum lightened by lodging, by store, by tools, by some fee that has an abbreviation you've never met in church. You count anyway, fold anyway, hide anyway, because hope takes up the same space in a pocket as money. Outside, men write addresses on envelopes with their hat brims for desks. You send $3 home and buy tobacco, because both are habits that answer worry. The preacher on Sunday says labour is honest, and you nod because honesty and hunger often share a table. In the evening, the river throws a second-hand shine against the piers, and the town looks almost dressed up. You cough a small cough and pretend it belongs to someone behind you. The night clerk chalks the day's footage on a board like a hymn number, then goes to supper. Numbers move when rock moves, but breath lags behind both. 2 camps look at each other across the tracks and pretend they do not. Up the hill stand board houses cut from straight pine, clotheslines tight, porches swept clean by habit. Down by the river sit long barracks that smell of damp rail ties and creosote, bunks 3 high, a stove that eats cordwood like news. Men ride in from Kentucky, the Carolinas, and farther south where recruiters promise steady work and a bed, leaving farms, mills, and thin harvests behind. The company sorts people without raising its voice. Black crews bunk nearest the river, closer to the hoist and the powder shed. White crews take the hill in its breeze. Pay is the same on paper, shifts the same in chalk, but the line for supper forks and the foreman's jokes travel one way. Sunday brings 2 services and 1 hymn you can hear from both doors. In the evenings, laughter carries across the tracks like a dare. You keep your head down, your gear ready, and your lamp filled, because the tunnel doesn't grade on fairness. It grades on footage and your breath. Tools name the day before the foreman can, drill steels stacked by length and temper, nipples greased, collars checked. Muck shovels sharpened last night on a wheel, a boy turned with a boot. Spud bars against the wall, their tails bright from prying track. Timber comes by flat car, caps, posts, wedges, creosote black and slick enough to stripe your shirt for a week. You help carry a set toward the heading, shoulders sharing the grunt, sleeves going zebra. The timber boss, a quiet man missing 2 fingertips, taps the cap with a hammer and listens for good wood. He hears better than most men see. You stand the posts, squint the plumb, drive a wedge until the set talks back. Lagging goes up and the roof settles like a big animal deciding to nap somewhere else. The air smells of pitch, oil, and hot iron. You step back, admire nothing, and fetch the jack because the face is ready and the clock already thinks you're late. Air moves because fans insist, not because the mountain is generous. Intake duct hangs like a tin intestine, patched with canvas and willpower, coughing a narrow breeze that forgets your name if you step 6 feet away. The face stays dry on purpose. The bit bites faster when it throws powder, and powder becomes the weather. White on your knuckles, white on your tongue, white in the moustache you forgot to shave. It lifts from the steel in a glitter you cannot catch with your lamp, but feel in your gums. You sneeze and your handkerchief turns bakery grey. A joke rises and nobody spends it. Men knot rags behind their necks, tie sleeves across their mouths, or simply turn their heads and work with one eye closed against the spray. The company keeps a waterline coiled like a promise and uses it on the track, not the face. Wet costs time. Time costs money. Your chest starts a quiet negotiation you do not yet understand. Accidents keep a schedule. A missed cut hangs and a boot heel finds the wrong ridge. You lunge, catch, swear softly, then laugh, because you nearly weren't here. A muck car rolls before the pin drops and kisses a shin down to reminder. Fingers get curious and the rail answers, loud enough to set teeth. The first aid shack near the portal has a door painted to look cleaner than it is. Inside, a nurse with sleeves rolled tidy wipes, grit from scrapes, and says the doctor can see you Thursday if you're still thinking about it then. Tonic sits in brown bottles with labels that claim 19 virtues and prove none. The label glue smells like Sundays. The foreman signs the accident book with a stub and tells you to keep your hands where God meant them. You nod, because arguing here is a hobby for men who can afford to lose daylight. You cinch your cuff tighter and go back in before the dust your lamp stir decides to settle on top of you. Evening stretches thin and then gives up. The camps breathe in a different keys but cook the same stews. In town, a clerk wraps cheese and chalks it under your number. You sign nothing and owe more anyway. Two boys split a 10-cent haircut, the barber making each feel like a paying man. A preacher borrows the mess hall and sets a hymn to a pump organ that wheezes with ambition. Cards tick through hands in the back, quiet as falling dust. A woman at the boarding house boils shirts in blue water, lifts them with a stick and pins them to a rope that sags like an old argument. Children chase along the cinders until a whistle scolds them home. You sit on the steps, roll tobacco into a paper that tears where your fingers are cracked, and watch the river move as if it has a plan. Somewhere a harmonica leans into a tune that tried to be happy and settled for brave. You cough once, then again, and tell yourself the night is cold. Pay looks fine on paper, the way a photograph looks like supper. It buys beans, bacon, boot soles, stamps, lamp oil, and the envelope bound home. It does not buy new lungs. You count your money with fingers still dusted, and slide 3 bills into a sleeve that smells of soap, then lick the flap and taste grit anyway. You think about the boy who said his cough came from sleeping by the window, and how he spits behind the hoist where nobody walks. You think about the man who keeps a silk scarf like he's seen in magazines, swears it catches more than cotton, and you wonder if the scarf or the story does the work. The clerk reminds you of store credit and the way it grows when you aren't looking. You buy a tin of salve for the crack in your knuckle that refuses to close. You buy a small sack of candy because a child's hand will open on it back home. You spend what's left on breath in a bottle and call it medicine long enough to sleep. Morning again, lamps checked at the door, caps tightened, steel rubbed with an oily rag so threads mind their manners. You shoulder the jack and feel yesterday in both wrists before the trigger even winks. The heading smells like hot iron and somebody's breakfast living its second life in a lunch pail. A hose cuffs your ankle as you pass. The muck car sulks on a crooked rail until a bar asks it nicely. The face leans close, all sparkle and promise, the kind of glitter that looks like treasure until you remember it wants your lungs. You tap the steel against your boot, listen for true, and marry bit to rock. Air rushes your ear with the thin hiss of a letter opened in secret. The lamp throws a small, stubborn sun across the quartz and mica while the bit chews a slow circle and swallows. The handle kicks. Your shoulders argue. The wall answers in dust, fine as flour and quicker than thought. Somewhere behind you a fuse bucket clinks like a drawer of spoons. Someone laughs at nothing. Someone else coughs and pretends his throat is only thirsty. Dry cutting sings. It sings in your elbows, in the flute of the bit, in the way dust leaps for the corners of your nose like it has your address. Your buddy from Carolina keeps count of seconds on every hole, swears faster steel beats smarter men, and the foreman's grin says he believes the same. Rags tie across faces in a dozen styles, none of them in any catalogue. A man tries a silk scarf and looks like a picture in a magazine until he coughs his dignity into his glove. The compressor knocks time like a drunk metronome, steady enough to trust, crooked enough to teach humility. You pace your feed with breath, you ration like coal in winter, a little, then a little more. Powder dust coats the creases of your knuckles so neatly it looks deliberate. When you stop, the settling air feels heavier than you are, as if the mountain took back whatever you stole and left a bill in your chest. Engineers come by with clipboards and chalk up footage like coaches who think the game is only the scoreboard. They like the dry face, the quick cut, the neat stem, the cars that move without complaint. Someone says wet would be safer, someone else says wet is slower, and the pen keeps moving. A rumour walks the gangway. A man out west sprayed the cut and the boss made him mop with his hat. Nobody laughs loud, but nobody doubts the hat. You run the pattern anyway because arguing with the wall is different from arguing with payroll. Outside holes burn cut relief, lifters, tamp the clay, check the leads, lay the fuses like crooked violin strings. When the signal comes, the heading empties without drama. Boots counting ties, heart sneaking a beat too quick. The shot thumps, the roof tobel dusts, a warm push kisses your ear. Then silence returns, satisfied, while you wait for the afterthought rocks to stop explaining gravity. The wash barrel sits by the portal, water shining like mercy and tasting like coins. You dunk a rag, wipe the ridge of your ear, and pull trails from your neck that pattern the cloth the way roads cross a county. Men rinse mouths and spit grey lines into gravel that already understood. Some soap finds a face, some never does. You scrape nails on a brick and inspect the half-moons for proof you are still a person. A boy laughs when the bucket goes cold down his collar. He laughs again when you do it back. Boots thump mud off on the sill and leave white prints that look like chalk maps of rivers. By the time you reach the truck, your skin feels cleaner, and your tongue does not, a trade you accept because the day won't negotiate. You rub along your eyelids until grit turns to paste and strings away on your fingertip. The inside of your nostrils shows a white ring neat as a collar. The water goes grey, then opal, then a sullen milk. You dry with your sleeve and keep the towel for the next poor soul. Sunday grants a few hours wide enough to remember your name. You shave in a pan and nick your jaw because the blade is a veteran of better faces. Town offers a diner with coffee that almost forgets yesterday. A store with boots you promise yourself next month, and a counter where stamps smell like glue and hope. A fiddler plays inside a doorway until his bow frays, then counts coins like blessings. The black church down by the barracks fills with a hymn that climbs the hill anyway. The white church answers with the same melody at a different pace. You write a letter that mentions weather twice and the pay once. Then leave the cough out because paper is no place for worry. On the way back, you buy oranges for the boarding house table and pretend the sharp smell is medicine. A newspaper on the counter praises progress in words that smell like varnish. Rumour says a funeral left the small church yesterday with more hats than names. You fold the paper for someone else and keep walking. By noon, the sun finds the river and pretends it is friendly. You nod back and mind your breath. Night writes its slow sentences, and you read every one. Your bunk creaks when you roll. The man above you has a cough that starts like a question and ends like a hammer. Someone mutters the word consumption and someone else says rock dust and nobody says the other word. 'Cause why give trouble a name that might hear you? A lantern hisses. The stove settles. The building breathes. You lie there counting ribs with your fingertips as if checking a fence, making sure nothing has slipped. Breath in, breath out. A pause you do not like. Breath again. The wind pushes through a gap in the window frame and brings clean air the way a postcard brings a town, picture only. Sleep arrives in pieces you have to assemble by feel. When it holds, you dream of a room without dust and wake tasting stone anyway. You cough once into the crook of your arm, decide it is only the cold boarding house talking, and roll the other way. Tomorrow, you'll stop by Nurse for tonic and a word meaning ordinary. The building answers by settling, like an animal that has chosen its spot for the night. You learn the sound of good rock and the sulk of bad. When the bit sings clear, you feed steady. When it chatters, you ease and shift until the face remembers manners. The steel heats and throws a dry perfume that tastes like pennies. Your gloves polish smooth at the palms where the handle bucks, and the muscle along your forearm hums like wire. The timber set behind you clicks as wedges settle deeper, a polite warning that everything up there is heavy and thinking about it. A lamp bobbles in the corner of your eye and makes halos in the dust you pretend are only tricks of light. Hoses writhe underfoot like lazy snakes looking for a warmer rock. The air, thin and exacting, feels measured out by someone who doesn't like you. You rock the jack forward, pull it back, spin the steel with a quick wrist so the bit doesn't cut a crooked opinion. The wall rewards good behaviour with powder finer than flour. It flies for your mouth like it knows your name. You keep working because the only way out is through. That is the rule here. The mess hall runs noon like a train schedule and nobody argues with the bell. Beans, cabbage, fried potatoes, a slab of sow belly hiding under gravy. Biscuits that remember heat but don't brag. Coffee lines up in cups the colour of old bone. Men from the riverside bring pepper and hot stories. Men from the hill bring jokes and neat sleeves. The cook works 2 pans and 1 laugh, wiping his forearm with a rag that knows everybody's name. A notice tacked by the door claims safety as a partnership but forgets to say with whom. You chew slow and feel grit announce itself in the back teeth. A boy from Bluefield swears onion cures dust if you eat it raw. Another swears milk settles it if you drink enough to float. No OSHA brochure on the bulletin. You swallow, nod, and go for another biscuit because hunger minds reason better than fear. The bell rings again. Everybody stands like the chair burned them a little. Powder day hits a rhythm you feel in your boots. You load stick after stick, twist caps on leads, tamp clay until the column sits tight as a sermon. Fuses lay against the face in shy arcs. The powder man checks lengths with a case knife and a stare that can hear the difference between quick and dead. You wipe sweat off a lip with a knuckle and taste sulphur for your trouble. The foreman watches the time in his wrist rather than the clock on the wall, then nods and the signal goes. Lamps turn, feet lift, palms open. You back down the drift, counting ties, 1, 2, 10, enough. The fuse whispers its thin promise along the rock. The first blast thumps your ribs like a door closed by a man who knows the house. The second proves the first wasn't lonely. Air rushes out, warm and rude, then tries to come back and fails. You wait for the afterfall because patience saves ankles more than prayers. Then muck begins again, steady as rent. Gawley Bridge sits up the road and pretends it is bigger than a bend in the river. A hardware window displays 3 kinds of chisels and 1 price that doesn't blink. The barber keeps a strop that sings and a jar of blue liquid that fixes bad ideas only in rumour. A boy sweeps the porch of the company office and spells his name in the dust before his mother scolds it away. The boarding house laundress boils shirts in a kettle so large it could hatch geese. She flicks the cuffs with a stick and steam writes letters on the ceiling. Saturday night, the picture house shows a newsreel about progress that looks a little like Here if you squint and lie. Sunday, the diner sells pie by the slice and coffee, refills like forgiveness. A tin of salve sits by the register for men who pay with cracked hands. You walk back down the road with oranges in a paper sack and the river talking big beside you. It talks bigger than it is. A cough becomes a habit the way tapping your lamp does, noticed only when it stops. First in the morning chill, then soon after the first cut, then whenever a joke lands crooked. It scrapes a small place behind your breastbone where breath used to slide. And your spit shows a grey that looks familiar now. The nurse down at the portal offers tonic with a label that believes in miracles. It tastes like licorice and good intentions. She asks her about masks, and you shrug toward the heading where dry meant fast and fast meant favoured. She frowns, writes your number on a card and tells you to return if fever joins the choir. A man at the pump pauses mid-sentence to cough until his eyes water, then laughs because laughing is cheaper than quitting. By evening, your chest feels tight in a way shirts can't explain. You loosen your collar. The air does not notice. Night chores smooth the edges of the day. You knock mud from your boots with the heel of your hand, sit on the step and scrape a stone across the shovel edge until it bites neat. A pan warms on the stove for shaving. The mirror throws you back with dust embedded where beard stubble used to win. You wash socks in water that froths grey and string them over the stove until they steam like small chimneys. A letter starts, stops, starts again. Because the words that matter are stubborn and the ones that don't come easy. You write that the hills are green and the pay is fair and leave out what the air does. The harmonica finds a tune by the doorway and an answer drifts over from the barracks by the river. You fold your paper, lick the stamp and taste the day one last time. Then you turn down the lamp and count breaths like coins. The hoist cage lifts you to daylight that looks too clean at first, then shows its own dust where trucks idle. A man from the river barracks leans on a post and tries not to cough while pretending to roll a cigarette. Across the yard, the powder shed clerk ticks numbers on a chalkboard. Neat and careful, as if careful could be a helmet. The foreman calls out crews, voice thin from shouting through cloth all day. You and the Carolina kid tighten lamp belts and check caps, little rituals that keep the world together when rock wants it apart. A mule brays at the rail spur. Someone laughs without smiling. Hoses snake from the compressor house, sweating frost where they leak. You shoulder the jack, touch the steel to your boot toe for luck, and feel yesterday shake your wrists. The hill camp and the river barracks empty toward the portal in two lines that never mingle. Boots clicking on track. Breath showing, eyes steady. A whistle scolds the valley and the mountain answers with its usual silence. You tug your cap low and step back into the dark that pays in dollars and dust. You learn to read men by their eyes. The ones who squint against dust and keep laughing last longest. The ones with the faraway stare plan on leaving, and sometimes do. The Ohio man counts holes under his breath like a prayer he refuses to say out loud. The timber boss knocks caps and listens, then taps your shoulder twice when the set is good, once when it isn't. The gang from the river moves as one body, practiced and close. They share water, share snuff, share a silence that works like respect. A boy new to the heading shows up with clean cuffs and a grin. By noon, both are gone. At the face, you trade the jack back and forth with the Carolina kid and learn his rhythm the way you learn a song, by missing the beat until you don't. When his lamp dips, you pull slack. When your shoulders shake, he feeds. Nobody says partnership. You just keep the steel straight and trust each other not to blink when the bit bites. Trust is the only mask that never fogs. The company doctor visits on Thursdays with a bag that looks heavy and advice that isn't. He holds a stethoscope to ribs and hears ambition more than breath. He says rest on Sunday and keep a scarf, writes pharmacy words on a card with your number, and reminds the foreman that men laid off for illness starve faster than they heal. You watch a fellow with good hands and a bad cough step from the line and then step back, because stepping out means going home with no home to go to. The nurse asks about sputum and fever, eyes kind, voice brisk, and tucks a bottle of licorice tonic into your pocket like a secret. Outside, the compressor coughs a reply and the portal pulls men in again. The doctor writes in his book neat columns that add to a shape you won't name. He says keep to the fresh air when you can. You nod because where you can is not a place on the map down here. News travels by shoe leather and lamp talk. A boy on the hoist says a crew up the west heading found a wet seam that made mud to the ankles and slowed cars for half a shift. The foreman cursed the stream like it had joined a strike. Another says a shot cut long and popped late. No harm done, only hearts. A third says the company might bring in a compressor that breathes like a real chest and not a tired dog. You measure all three stories on the same scale you use for fuses. Maybe. Probably and not yet. In the evening, the harmonica player by the boarding house door stretches the tales into something that sounds like music. By morning, they shrink back to facts you can carry in one hand. Either way, the jack waits, the face glitters, and the lamp makes a small, stubborn sun you shoulder toward the dark. Winter settles without asking. Breath shows like a mistake when you talk, and the river grows a skin that looks strong until a stone goes through it. Your gloves never dry all the way. Your shirt remembers yesterday even after the kettle. The path to the portal crunches like sugar every morning, and inside the mountain the cold hangs near the mouth before work warms it mean. You pull the jack toward the face and feel the handle colder than thought, then hot in the middle of the first cut. Sweat crawls down your ribs and cools to a rash you scratch with a dirty knuckle. Steam climbs from men like they are small engines built to fail on schedule. Puddles skin over at the mouth and break under boots with a sound like thin glass. At dinner, a biscuit crumbles into powder that looks too familiar. You ration breath the way you ration lamp oil. Careful, stingy, and hoping the day ends before the jug does. You write home again and forgive yourself the edits. You say the work is steady and the men are good. You say money comes on Fridays and the river is pretty in frost. You do not say the cough is moving in like a cousin. You do not say the nights are full of counting. You fold the paper around 3 creased bills and a little picture ticket from the moving show, a proof that life tries. At the post you meet Lewis again. He mails a small parcel wrapped in grocery paper, something rattling inside. Marbles, he says, planning with one side of his mouth. For my boy. He likes the ones that look like cat eyes. You nod, buy 2 stamps, and smell the gum like hope. On the walk back, you cough into your scarf and tell yourself the cold is honest, if nothing else is. The river lifts a little fog and sets it on the tracks like slow breath. Saturday. The camp hosts a dance in the mess hall, scrub tables pushed to the wall, lanterns strung like patient stars. Fiddles start hopeful, then settle into work tunes that know where the beat should fall. Women from town arrive with cousins and chaperones. Hands are washed twice and caps disappear under benches. You dance once and breathe fine, twice and feel a nail in your chest. 3 times and step out to the stoop where cold air forgives easier than men do. Inside, the Ohio man grins for the first time all week and shows a 2-step that makes the floorboards talk. Lewis claps the offbeats and laughs until he coughs, then coughs until he laughs again. You lean on the doorframe, watch your breath drift, and tell yourself tomorrow you will feel stronger. The lanterns hum. Outside, the river keeps time against the pilings. Patient as a clock nobody wants to read. The lamp house wakes before men do. You queue for a carbide fill and scrape yesterday's slag from the tip with a nail you keep bent for the job. The flame hisses small and blue when you test it, a tame thing that remembers teeth. Belts get checked, buckles snugged, and a boy with clever hands rubs a little soap on goggle rims to keep them from fogging. An old trick that works until breath says otherwise. Down by the forge, steels line a rack like a set of bones. The blacksmith takes one with a tongue's kiss of tongs, draws the temper, and strikes a rhythm you can feel in your wrists. Wide face, clean edge, point true. He drops the red tip into oil, and it answers with a dragon sigh. The shop smells like heat iron and a frying pan's dream. You thread collars, grease nipples, check hose gaskets with thumb and ear. A leaky cuff can sound like rain. The timber boss counts sets with 2 missing fingers and a pencil behind his ear. You shoulder a cap with its wedges and promise the roof a joint that won't complain. After shift, the wash barrels steam behind boards high enough to pretend at privacy. First the oil, because fat bribes dust to let go. You rub kitchen grease along your neck and temples until the grey turns slick and surrendering. Then the lye soap, shaved thin into a pan and poured with kettle water that stings the day awake where it shouldn't. Sawdust comes next, worked into hair like a dry shampoo. Binding grit so the rinse doesn't glue it deeper. A friend flicks your ear with a wet finger and calls it inspection. You blow a long line from one nostril, then the other, a small rope of paste that lands like a joke nobody will tell twice. Fingernails scrape against a brick until half moon show pink again. A rag runs across your teeth because the grit tastes like a pencil you've chewed too long. Shirts soak in blue water and come out almost themselves. You pat your chest dry and the skin under your collarbone feels tender, as if someone knocked there. Sleep has a ritual to earn it. Socks stretch on a cord near the stove, dripping minor rivers into a pan. Your boots get stuffed with newsprint so they wake shaped like feet instead of sorry. A dab of menthol under the nose buys you 3 minutes of clean theatre. A mustard plaster on the chest buys 2 hours of heat, 1 of second thoughts. The bunk slats creak in their own language. You turn onto a shoulder that complains but holds. Men trade remedies between coughs, onion syrup, honey with whiskey, a spoon of turpentine on sugar offered with a face that swears it worked for somebody's cousin. The Ohio man smears salve and stares at the ceiling as if counting knots could slow lungs. You count breaths instead, in and out like tally marks you don't want to finish. When the harmonica quits, the coughs sound bigger. You tuck your scarf around your neck because warmth feels like armour, even if it's cloth that remembers last week. Food keeps its promises when men can't. Morning pails get packed like letters. Biscuit. A folded slice of fatback. Beans that set into their own gravity overnight. If you're rich today, there's a cold wedge of fried pie you don't tell anybody about until the smell does it for you. Supper runs on stews that remember bones, cabbage that does what it can, potatoes that forgive a heavy hand with salt. The mess hall woman slips extra drippings to anyone walking like rails were tied to his shins. She has a list, not on paper, of who sends money home and who needs meat. Payday means coffee that tastes less like advice and more like something a person ordered. In pockets, tobacco rations share space with stamps, nails, and a marble or two that rolled out of somebody's memory. Dice patter sometimes, quiet as rain, and a man wins back what he borrowed last Tuesday. The foreman eats alone, which is a way of counting too. Work settles into liturgy, pattern the face, drilling outside holes with a steady feed so the rock breaks toward you, not at you. Burn cut to start the heart of the blast. Relief holes where the wall whispers weak. Lifters to keep the floor from climbing into the car. You shade your lamp with a palm to see sugar streaks. They shine like they're happy to meet you. The dry shower from the steel is constant. A weather that ignores hats and prayers. You spit grey to one side and hit your own boot. Signals keep hands attached. 2 taps from the Catman, 3 from you. 1 long drag of the lamp for out. Between rounds you advance the intake duct with tin snips, tape, and short words. The fan pushes a ribbon of air that feels like a promise made by a politician. Real, but narrow. You prize tracks straight with a bar and listen for the click that means the car will be less of an opinion and more of a wheel. When the shot goes, patience keeps feet and ankles whole. You keep it mostly. Sundays stretch just far enough to hold small repairs. A razor stutters across your jaw while the mirror gives the kind of advice that doesn't help. The barber in town sells a tonic that smells of pine and says it makes hair brave. You save your coins for salve and stamps instead. Church happens twice with 1 hymn that crosses the tracks like a courteous traveller. After, the river offers a clean sound, if not clean water, and you sit so close to the bank your boots get damp anyway. You write letters with ordinary words because ordinary is what you want to send. You do not write about a hand pressing under your sternum when you climb from the heading. You do not write about a boy who coughed and put a smile over it like a cap, then didn't come Monday. You tuck $2 into the paper and hear them touch. On the way back, oranges again, because the peel smells like a bright day. You breathe deep and wait to cough, hoping the air forgets to remind you. The funeral is quick because shifts aren't. Pine boards planed thin, 4 men to a corner, hymn from the hillside, a church drifting to the river like a careful visitor. The preacher keeps to short sentences that know their work. Dust to dust, mercy to mercy, wages to the widow when the books are done. Men stand in coats that saw better cloth before they saw this camp. Hats come off and show pale brows in a ring where caps ride. Someone coughs and tries to fold it into the hymn. Someone else answers with a hand on his back. You study the ground as if it might tell you where air went. The company man nearby takes names for the ledger and promises to write home for anybody who can't. Later, over beans, a rumour says the boy died of pneumonia, not dust. Another rumour says rock dust makes a quicker pneumonia the doctor doesn't like to name. You chew slow, nod as if either answer helps, and wrap a biscuit in a handkerchief for the widow's door. You experiment because breath insists. A flour sack becomes a mask after you wet it and tie the corners behind your neck. It cools your throat until the dust warms it again. A handkerchief thick with kitchen grease catches grit and slicks your lips with salt and fat. Lewis shows you how to fold silk 6 ways and trap it under the cap brim so it stays put. It looks like a gentleman's joke until both of you cough right through it. One man soaks a rag in buttermilk and swears the sour grabs the powder. Another chews pine resin because the taste feels like medicine, even when it isn't. You talk about rigging the water line to the jack and spraying the face between holes. The foreman hears the talk and says mud ruins cars and cars move pay. You watch the bit throw sugar into the lamp beam and decide experiments are what men do and rules write in chalk. Chalk likes a dry rag. Supper turns into clinic because the mess hall has chairs. The nurse sets up on a side table under a sign that wants to be cheerful and can't quite make it. She listens with a stethoscope that goes cold fast and taps your back like a carpenter checking studs. She asks if the cough wakes you, if you sweat at night, if the rattle sits low or climbs. You answer honest because lying to her feels like stealing from someone who counts pennies for kindness. She writes your number and a note. Consider outside work. You both look at the note like it might grow legs and walk to the foreman. It won't. She gives you a small envelope of something white to dissolve in water and a face that believes in tomorrow on principle. Fresh air, she says, and easy. The tunnel has policies about both. You thank her anyway and step back into the line of men who pretend health is the decision. In town, a lawyer posts a flyer offering to speak for injured men. The paper curls at the edges because the river keeps a damp mouth. He wears a hat that fits, and a suit that remembers daylight and says compensation is a right when the job makes you smaller. The company clerk stands in his doorway across the street and dusts a ledger he already dusted. The barber hears both sides and keeps sharpening razors. You read the flyer and think of your brass check number, how small it looks alone and how big it feels when someone calls it out. A man beside you says suits talk, minds answer, with rock. He pockets a flyer anyway. You buy stamps, stand long enough to breathe air that hasn't met the face, and walk back along the tracks where cold cars rest like tired animals. The flyer in your pocket warms to your leg until sweat sticks it there. By the boarding house you forget it for an hour, then remember and smooth it flat on the table. Paper can wait. Breath can't. The heading grows teeth the way winter grows corners. Long string of shots leaves a roofline that doesn't like you. Timber follows, wedges driven home until the cap hums a low note you feel in molars. You set lagging close, boards like ribs, and trust the pattern held. The intake duct snags on a jag and tears. You patch it with canvas and a curse, then a second patch to discourage ideas. Air sneaks forward like a stingy uncle and stops, 3 steps shy of the face. You nudge tracks straight, with a bar that shocks the palm even through leather. Cars run better. Men swear less. The foreman nods once. Your lamp halo cuts a tunnel inside the tunnel. A smaller world where your hands are the only law. Dust turns every head into a chalk statue when the bit sings. You keep your mouth closed and breathe through your teeth because habit says that's safer. Habit learned from someone who isn't here. At night you measure the day by sounds that don't need light. The stove ticks down. The building sighs. The coughs sort themselves into sections like a choir finding harmony by accident. Someone writes a letter and the pencil scratches like small rain. A man whispers a prayer he wouldn't say out loud at noon. You lie on your back and count heartbeats under the sternum, as if they were stitches holding a coat together. When a spasm takes you, it feels like the coat pops a seam, then another, then holds because there's nowhere else to go. You sit up, sip from a bottle with licorice medicine the nurse believes in, and breathe through a window crack you braced open with a dime. Cold air slides along your tongue and tells your throat a story about other places. You listen until the story ends, lie down again, and tuck the scarf under your head like a second pillow. Sleep comes late and shallow. Morning will come anyway. Monday starts with white rock shining like it believes in itself. The face here is glass ground small, sandstone whose sand forgot it was ever beach. The foreman calls it good stone, meaning fast footage, and his smile looks like a ledger pleased with its columns. You shoulder the jack and the first bite throws a powder so fine it skips past the scarf without slowing. It gathers in the lamp beam like slow snow that fell indoors by mistake. Your tongue tastes metal. Your teeth feel grit arguing with enamel. The bit sings a narrow note and warmth creeps up your wrists into the meat of the elbow. You ease, reset, feed again. Behind you the timber set clicks politely as wedges climb into their best selves. Men trade the jack in practice steps, and the pattern becomes a comfort that lies a little. By noon your handkerchief shows a neat slate ring where a mouth was. You keep working because stone doesn't care about talk and talk won't push a car. Across the tracks the river barracks shake out early and hit the heading with one body. Their line moves like it learned from the river. Bend, press, never stop. They get the hardest headings and the lowest breeze. Everyone knows it and keeps the knowing quiet. At the commissary window the sign says 2 lines and means exactly that. On Sunday their hymn raises the roof first and you hear the chorus on the hill after. In the heading they pull cars cleaner than anyone, riding the coupler like a thought and catching pins without pinching fingers. They teach each other tricks with a nod, not a boast. You share water when the barrel arrives. They pass a tin of snuff like a small treaty. A boy with cat-like balance dances the rail to keep boots dry and laughs when the foreman barks. Later he loads twice his weight and pretends the sound never landed. You learn names slower than you trade breath. Dust knows everybody right away. Drilling dry means the steel eats faster, and faster means fuses sooner. You chalk the pattern, shoot the burn cut just right so the wall wants to leave, then feather the reliefs until the heading can think straight again. The bit like sugar seams best, those bright streaks that sparkle like friendly knives. Each hole makes its own weather. Fine powder lifts and hangs. A silk curtain you could punch through but never fold. It coats lashes, finds the hinge in your jaw, slides into places you didn't advertise. You try a damp rag under the scarf and it buys you 3 holes and a headache. A man lashes an old can to the hose and begs for water to cool the bit. The foreman shakes his head because mud climbs rails and rails carry pay. The compressor knocks time and you race it, knowing it wins every day and still keeping score. A shot misfires late on the next round and the wall coughs a reminder that gravity keeps all receipts. The nurse's table shows up at supper again, and you let her listen. Cold Bell circles your back, then your chest. Her brow folds when she hears the rattle sitting low like a stubborn tenant. Outside work, she writes, and your stomach answers before your mouth. Outside pays less, and less buys nothing kindly. She offers a paper for the foreman and a bottle that tastes like licorice over a shovel. You tuck both into your pocket and tell her you'll talk tomorrow. You won't. 10 men line behind you, 2 with fevers that make their eyes glassy. 1 with lips gone blue at the edges, though he insists the stove smoke did it. A fellow from the river barracks coughs until he spits grey into a rag and folds the rag like a letter. His friend steadies his shoulder without making a speech of it. You step aside and feel something press behind the breastbone. A hand that should not be there. The stew smells like onion. You eat anyway. Payday again, and the office hums with pens and tired pride. The clerk fingers the stack, peels your bills, then nudges a few round metal checks across for small change. Store tokens stamped with the company name that shine like fresh promises. You count, fold and push $3 into an envelope addressed in careful block letters. The rest buys beans, salve, tobacco, stamps, and a paper bag of lemon drops for a niece who thinks your job is building a river. Outside, men write on hat brims and palm envelopes into pockets that remember every crease. One fellow pays down his storebook a little, and the clerk marks it like a good deed that cost nobody anything. The barber holds the door with a broom and announces he'll stay open late for anyone who wants to look respectable for Sunday. You nod, cough into your scarf where nobody has to hear it, and buy a second stamp for the letter you keep editing into courage. Night tries to heal what day unstitched. You boil a rag, lay it warm across your chest, and listen to the whistle hiding under your breath like a kettle 3 rooms away. The bunk creaks, the stove ticks, a harmonica gives up halfway through a tune everybody knows. You think about the waterline again, how easy it would be to lash a valve to the jack, miss the face between holes, make mud and trade speed for breath. The foreman's voice arrives in your head, all copper wire and arithmetic. You picture the river cruise boy dancing the rail and wonder if he'll be here next payday. Outside, the gorge holds its cold like a grudge. You make a plan you don't say out loud. Tomorrow you'll wet the cup between rounds and take whatever names they call you. You cough once more, the kind that drags a nail across the ribs, and lie still until the echo fades. Sleep weighs the room, decides you've paid enough, and settles in patches. Morning will measure you again. You do it on a Tuesday before the foreman finishes his rounds. A coffee can, 3 nail holes, baling wire twisted to a hose clamp. You cinch the contraption to the airline and crack the valve just enough to make a mist. Between holes you tip the can, the steel cools, and the face darkens to a calmer grey that almost looks kind. The sound changes, less shriek, more chew, and for 3 minutes the dust stays home like it finally learned manners. Then comes mud. It slicks the floor, glues chips into clods, and gives the cars opinions about traction. Wheels chatter, rails shine, and your boots skate where yesterday they bit. Your buddy grins behind his rag because he can taste his lunch again. The muckers curse because the shovel now lifts paste, not sugar. You keep at it between rounds, careful with the drip, just enough to keep powder from floating. When the foreman finally swings by, he looks at the wet prints, looks at the car wheels, and writes your number in his head. You can feel it from 10 feet. Relief and trouble split the same breath. After the round, he calls a meeting at the portal, sunlight sharp enough to make eyes water. He explains footage like scripture and says dry keeps you honest because it tells on lazy steel. He holds up a stack of cotton rags as if they were masks and declares them sufficient if tied right. Someone asks us about water. He says water finds ankles and loses time. Someone mentions the doctor. He says the doctor says most coughs are winter being winter. The river crew listens with their faces blank in a way that isn't empty. The hillmen shift boots and study the ground. You tuck the coffee can into your lunch pail and pretend it's just a can. The foreman's voice runs out of patience before it runs out of words, and he finishes with the only number that matters. Today's footage target. Chalked hard enough to score the board. He dismisses you with a nod that feels like a warning. The mountain doesn't vote. Policy wears boots. By Wednesday, the cough carries its own luggage. Morning brings a pea rattle you can feel in the spine when you lean. At noon, you spit a neat grey string into the gravel, and then look around like you need permission to be alarmed. The nurse draws a line on her pad under your number, and writes rest, then looks at your hands and tries again with outside work. Timbering by the adit needs a man who thinks in plumb lines and swings a hammer without asking it questions. Outside pays less. You do the arithmetic on your fingers and every joint argues. Lewis tries a day on the surface driving stakes, comes back with a lighter pocket and a sunburn, and says the air tastes like forgiveness but the ledger doesn't. The Ohio man coughs twice, slow, and says a scarf is cheaper than rent. You nod like a man agreeing with weather. The nurse slips a bottle of licorice tonic into your palm and says fresh air once more, the way people say please. Night carries news nobody wants to own. A wagon leaves the river barracks after lights out, canvas pulled, wheels whispering like people in the church. By morning the bunk above the snuff tin is empty and the little mirror tack there shows only wood. The boy who danced rails hasn't ridden a coupler in 2 days. One man says he went home on the midnight train, another says home got smaller last week. A rumour walks the tracks about a burial up the road where the soil is thin and the names are thinner. The preacher at the hill church keeps his hat in his hands and does not say what he knows. You put a lemon drop from your niece on the bunk edge without thinking and then pocket it again because sweetness isn't a good monument. At supper the room speaks softer. Bowls pass steadier. And somebody starts a hymn no one finishes. Dust sits on your knuckles like it's been there all your life. Ritual fights back. You shave slow, nicking your jaw and pressing a rag until the sting makes its case. You grate an onion into syrup because somebody's grandmother swore by it, then chase it with a spoon of honey that lets the medicine pretend to be friendly. Socks steam over the stove, boots drink yesterday's newspaper, shirt soak in blue that promises more than it delivers. A letter arrives from your niece, 3 lines about a spelling prize and 2 about how lemon drops taste like sunshine. You lay the paper flat on the table and cough sideways so the grit goes anywhere else. The harmonica at the door tries a happy tune and decides to be brave instead. You fold the letter back into its envelope with hands that remember rock more than pen. For a minute the room smells like onions, soap and fresh glue. For a minute the chest loosens, as if it heard the news too. You tuck the envelope under your pillow like a charm, and sit until the stove ticks cool. The next shift throws a late pop and reminds everyone patience outruns legs. You set the fuses neat, check lengths, and clear back counting ties by habit. The first blast thumps your ribs, the second waits longer than it should, and drops a handful of stones from a place you hadn't offered. Dust leaps like it wants a promotion. You crouch behind a timber set and hold your breath until the blood in your ears sounds like a watch. When the afterfall finishes its small sermon, you rise, brush grit from your cap brim, and taste metal that isn't from the lamp. The foreman writes something in his book without looking up. You drag a car with the bar, shovel to the lip, and pretend the wheeze is just work having its say. By quitting time, the cough has a voice and you can't ignore its grammar. You promise yourself a talk at dawn, ask for a week outside, swing a hammer under sky, buy back a little breath while the ledger scowls. You've negotiated worse. You tell your lungs to wait for morning. Dawn finds you already rehearsing the ask. Coat buttoned high, cap tugged low. You walk to the portal office where timesheets curl at the corners and a pot of coffee simmers into tar. The foreman stands with his thumbs in his belt, ledger under one arm, face arranged to spend the fewest words possible. You say you'll take outside work a week, timbering by the adit, stake lines, form boards, whatever keeps you in air that doesn't argue. He studies your eyes, not your hat, and nods once. Pays lighter, he says, and there's no bonus for fresh air. He flips a page, tears a stub with your number, and writes yard in a square that already held the shadow of your name. Report to the timber boss, bring your hammer. He slides you a chalk line and a grin that isn't one. Keep your nose clear, he adds, which is either kindness or arithmetic. You thank him anyway, pocket the stub and step toward daylight that tastes almost like mercy. Outside has its own grammar. You drive survey stakes along a line of string that hums in the breeze, tap, sight, tap again, then mark grade on a lathe with carpenter's pencil that smells of cedar and arithmetic. You help set forms for a culvert, boards slick with warm creosote, clamps biting, corners trued until even the river would respect them. Gravel rattles from the dump and you wheelbarrow loads that try to snake sideways, arms burning a clean, honest burn you almost missed. Sun finds your neck. Frost hangs in the shadow of the pile. Your breath lifts and vanishes without explaining itself. The air tastes of pine, coal smoke, and something like forgiveness. You carry sawhorses, drive spikes, and measure twice because the timber boss does not repeat. By dusk your shirt salt's white at the collar, and your spit is only spit. You sleep that night like a barn with its doors open. At noon you sit on a sawhorse and eat biscuit and hoop cheese, while the nurse makes her rounds like a mail carrier for bad news. She presses the cold bell to your ribs and listens long enough to knit her brow. Keep to this work, she says. If you go back in, that rattle will unpack. You ask the word for what's happening and she weighs silence, then says, dust lung, very gently, as way someone says winter to a garden. The doctor in town could listen hard and write a line that might help a lawyer more than a foreman. You mention the flyer tacked by the barber. She nods without smiling and says, paper won't breathe for you either. She slips a packet of white powder into your palm, tells you to dissolve it, and not to lie down right after you eat. You promise to stay outside a week, and the look she gives you is relief arguing with doubt. Payday under sky adds coins but subtracts bills. The outside rate arrives with the arithmetic of disappointment, honest on the page and unhelpful at the table. You peel off money for room, for stamps, for beans, for a tin of liniment that pretends to change its mind once you own it. $3 still go home because a niece with a spelling ribbon deserves proof that tunnels can make groceries, not only coughs. On the road you meet Lewis heading in, scarf tied soldier neat, cough tucked behind his teeth. You split an orange and the peel sprays light. He laughs, calls it medicine, then eats the long way around the slices like a careful man. You do not say the pay is smaller. He does not say the air is worse. You shake hands and both study your palms like maps you can't afford to read. At the office window, the clerk pushes 2 bright script tokens with the change, little moons with the company's name stamped hard enough to leave an echo. You buy a stamp and write your sister's town in block letters, because the sorting man reads certainty better than cursive. Sleep doesn't trust promises. You prop the window with a spoon and listen to the gorge trade secrets with the wind. The bunk slats complain when you turn. The cough in the next room keeps bad time with the stove's cooling ticks. The Ohio man, also outside this week, mutters that the doctor knows 3 kinds of chest music and none end in applause. He shows you a postcard from home with a cornfield and a note about rain that came at the wrong hour. You press mustard to your ribs and feel the heat bite a line of worry you did not know existed. He asks if outside feels like healing. You say it feels like borrowing. He nods, says borrowing is still better than begging, then rolls over and counts his own breaths. The mustard stings, then settles. The room smells like winter and old remedies. You touch each rib like you're checking fence posts after a storm, counting what still stands. Outside work tomorrow, you say to nobody, another week if they let me. 2 days outside buy you colour in the cheeks and room in a sentence. On the 3rd, a man turns an ankle on the rail and the foreman points at you with the shortest sentence he owns. Back in, just for a round. You tie the scarf anyway, tuck his greasy rag under it, and slip the coffee can mister into your pail, because hope sometimes rides in junk. The heading greets you with its glittering lie, and the compressor with its tired hymn. You miss between holes when backs are turned, and the dust hesitates, then finds another door. Mud slicks the floor. Wheels object. The foreman's eyebrow climbs and pauses. He lets it go once, for speed's sake, and writes nothing. By quitting time, your chest is a drawer that sticks again. Outside bought you 2 days, inside spent them in 2 hours. Dust, you learn, moves faster than doctors. Back inside for just a round, becomes 2, then 3, because rounds stack like plates when nobody's washing. The heading greets you with its glittering lie and a breath that pinches first, then holds. You lash the coffee can again, drill the burn cut true, and let a hush of water tame the shriek. For 3 holes it works, and you taste lunch instead of pennies. Then wheels complain, mud answers, and the foreman's eyebrow writes a neat warning. You can read at 20 feet. You keep the drip small, a courtesy to traction and pride. Dust still wins because it studies men for a living. Your buddy feeds, you lean, the steel chews, and the wall powders into weather. You feel the old hand slide under your breastbone and tug. You step back 2 beats longer than habit and pretend you are checking fuses. The capman doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. Everyone hears breath the way they hear a misfire. Late, sharp, memorable. The wash barrel becomes surgery. Oil first, always rubbed into temples and hairline, until grey turns slick and gives up. Lye soap shaved, poured and stirred until it bites your knuckles honest. Sawdust worked hard into your hair, binding grit so water can carry it off instead of gluing it deeper. You rinse, spit, rinse again, and watch a string of paste leave your nose like a worm that never learned to. A man with good humour flicks your ear. You flick back because dignity is cheaper than medicine. You scrape nails on brick until half moons show pink, and saw. The rag across your teeth pulls grit like filings. You spit grain to gravel that already knew what colour it would be. Shirts soak in blue water that promises a brighter truth and delivers a compromise. You pat your chest dry and feel tenderness under the collarbone, as if someone set a small weight there and forgot to claim it. The towel goes to the next man like a favour you hope comes back. The nurse calls your name at supper and writes a note heavier than its paper. Go to town, she says. Doctor. X-ray if you can pay. Letter for the foreman either way. You ride the truck to Gawley Bridge with your cap in your lap and the flyer from the lawyer folded to the size of courage. The doctor's office smells of carbolic and old magazines. He listens with cold bell, then longer with his bare ear. He says the word you already felt. Dust. Not coal. Rock. He spells silica like a teacher and taps the place it lives now. You can take a picture if you have the money. The picture will show what the ear already told him. He writes a letter for the foreman. No further exposure to dust. Outdoor work advised. His pen hesitates on advised. He names a price that makes you smile without humour. You pay anyway and keep the receipt like a talisman even paper can't believe in. The lawyer meets men in a back room where a pot-belly stove keeps confidences. He says compensation like a promise and mass claim like a hymn. He asks for names, dates, pay stubs, and any letters that tell the truth on letterhead. You give your name and your number. Your buddy from the river barracks gives his and eyes the door. The lawyer's hat sits perfect, his words smoother than rail steel. He says dust kills slower than a blast and leaves thinner funerals. He says the company knows the word silica even when it writes quartz on the board. A man asks what happens to jobs when papers get filed. The lawyer smiles and says the law protects workers. The room answers with a cough you could stack bricks on. You take a card, not a stand. Your friend pockets nothing and leaves because caution buys groceries, and groceries make the only speeches that get heard at home. Outside, the river keeps talking like it has time. Rain sets in, real rain, tapping tin and finding seams in every promise. The heading sweats and then frowns, rock swells where it pretended it never would. A shot pops late and small shards clatter, harmless. Then a larger slab sighs and tries to go where your boots stand. Signals shout, lamp turn, palm up, back, and the gang moves with the grace that fear learns when it's practiced. You and the timber boss slide a post forward, cap ready, wedges biting. The roof answers with a loner from in the teeth. The set takes weight and holds like a stubborn mule that finally remembers you feed it. Mud blooms at the rails and cars sulk into refusal. Bars pry, boots skid, and somebody's laugh turns to a curse right on time. The foreman counts heads and pretends it's arithmetic, not prayer. When quiet returns, your chest remembers it had a plan to fail and resumes. You lean on the handle, smiling because you're not under rock, and coughing because you're still under something. Night again, and the room sounds like a choir no one auditioned for. You prop the window with a spoon, brew onion syrup by lamp, and write half a letter you don't mail. You tuck the doctor's note under your pillow, as if the foreman sleeps there and reads. You think of the boy who danced rails, of Lewis splitting an orange into medicine, of the river crew hauling twice their share without a complaint wasted on it. You promise yourself you'll take the outside line at dawn, hand the note to the man with fewer words than mercy, and keep your lungs for letters and harmonicas. Dust moves faster than doctors, you tell the dark, and faster than paperwork. Your body repeats the lesson with each small wheeze. You count breaths like ties again. 1, 2, enough. And picture daylight folding over the portal like a blanket someone finally remembered to offer. Tomorrow, you say. Tomorrow you choose sky over glitter. The stove ticks yes, and the bunk slats keep time until you believe them. Morning brings your resolve with the coffee's bite. You fold the doctor's letter once more, check the edges as if truth might leak, and walk to the portal office where damp maps curl like tired tongues. The foreman stands with hat off, ledger on a nail, pencil behind his ear like a threat that doesn't need volume. You offer the paper. He reads without moving his face, then scratches your number into a square labelled yard, as if he'd already written it last night. Outside, he says, and the word lifts something off your ribs you didn't know had weight. Pays lighter. Don't make me chase you back in. You nod, thank him, and pocket the stub he tears like a ration. The men waiting behind you watch in the half-interest of people protecting their own air. On the way out you pass the lamp house, flame hissing blue behind mica. and feel the old pull to shoulder steel anyway. You keep walking. The sky looks ordinary, which is the kindest thing it can do. You take a hammer and a chalk line and join the timber boss along the adit where forms rise like ribs. Stakes go in on 2 blows if you mean them, 3 if you don't. You mean them. You sight the string against a distant rock and shave a lath until the edge is true. The sun finds your neck. The breeze tastes like pine and somebody else's laundry. Gravel rattles, a wheelbarrow complains, and your arms burn a plain, honest burn that doesn't hide a hook. You measure twice and the boss grunts approval, which is his way of singing. At noon you sit on a sawhorse and swallow coffee that doesn't taste like pennies. The nurse makes rounds with a satchel and a stare. She listens to your chest and the rattle has retreated like a dog that's learned the yard line. "Keep to sky," she says. You agree as if the word were a fence you can actually see. Letters go out this week with cleaner promises. You tell your sister the hills are showing spring and that the wages will run lean until your lungs forget the tunnel. You tuck $2 flat into the fold and add a note to your niece about lemon drops melting slow if you don't rush them. In town, you stop at the barber for a trim you can afford now that outside pays in quarters. He asks whether the talk of lawyers is only talk. You say paper is heavy on the tongue. He turns your chair toward the window and says a few men have signed their names and learned that pay stubs fold into silence faster than they turn into justice. The clerk across the street sweeps the porch like he's tiding a story. You buy stamps, breathe the varnish of the counter, and feel patience like a stone you can carry without pockets. 2 nights later the rain comes hard, river loud and roof honest. The camp smell of damp canvas, boiled shirts and coal smoke that can't make up its mind. You prop the window with a spoon and listen to the water explain itself to the pilings. Somewhere down by the barracks a wagon creaks where wagons shouldn't, and a lamp moves slow as a thought through the trees. In the morning a new cross appears on the thin hill beyond the bridge, unpainted, shy. Nobody announces a service. Men leave biscuits on a rail and walk back to work with hats brimming rain. Your breath holds easier because the day decided to rinse the valley, but the cough still taps twice after stairs as if checking you're home. You rub salve under your collarbone and tell yourself this is what mending sounds like. Not silence, just quieter hammers. The mud by the steps wears shoe prints like signatures. The timber boss teaches you joints that trust math. You notch a sill with a handsaw that chatters until your wrist convinces it to behave, then drive spikes that bite like small, reasonable animals. Caps meet posts in square persuasion. Wedges answer with low music in the teeth. You learn to hear when a set is good, not by the hammer, but by the pause that follows. You haul planks shoulder high, walk the line on muddy boards, and find a rhythm that spends you without cheating you. Men from the river barracks work the lower forms. They move like water deciding how to pass a rock. You trade nails, trade jokes, trade a chew with Lewis when he wanders up for air between rounds. He looks thinner and says he isn't. You don't argue, you show him how the saw likes to start on the backstroke and he shows you how to laugh without spending breath. Saturday. The mess hall turns into a picture of ordinary. Lanterns swing, Stu agrees with everybody, and a fiddle leans into a tune that remembers both churches. You write a short letter at the table edge, 3 lines about the rain, 1 about a bluebird on the rail, none about the wagon at night. The nurse sits down with her own bowl and asks if you're keeping to sky. You tap the chalk line in your pocket like a promise. She nods and says the doctor is seeing more chests he dislikes and fewer men brave enough to miss a shift. You promise to stay outside a while longer. Later you walk to the river and peel an orange. The spray stinging your knuckles where dust used to live. You breathe deep and the air goes all the way down. Not politely, but completely. It feels like borrowing. It feels like you might pay it back. Sunday afternoon you walk the track toward the town with Lewis and share the last of the oranges. He tells you about a letter from his wife, 4 pages of careful courage, and how their boy keeps marbles in a tobacco tin so the cat won't steal them. You tell him the doctor wrote no further exposure as if ink could stand in a doorway. He nods, kicks a tie plate into the weeds, and says a man can't live on sky alone when the ledger is hungry. At the bridge, you both stop and watch the River Royal brown from the rain, muscling past the pilings like it has deadlines too. On the way back, a wagon passes, canvas low, wheels speaking softly to the ruts. You both look away, then back. "Tomorrow," he says, "I'll ask for the yard." You clap his shoulder and feel the bone under the cloth. The orange rind in your hand smells bright and useless, and you tuck it in your pocket anyway. Monday brings Lewis to the portal office before the coffee remembers its name. He wears his best shirt and a scarf tied neat. Dr. Letter Courage without the letter. You stand 2 men back and hear the foreman's no before it grows a sentence. "Yard's full, stakes don't swing themselves. River gang needs you where the footage lives." His voice is schoolhouse flat. Lewis swallows, tries again, offers a week for breath. The pencil behind the ear doesn't move. A hillman steps up and gets a yes for outside because a form needs squaring by the road. It isn't shouted, it's just how the chalk lines fall. Lewis nods like a good student, turns toward the portal, and ties his rag without looking at you. You step out of line, catch his casual elbow, and trade a word not worth writing down. He says he'll be fine and smiles with only one side of his mouth. You pocket the coffee can mixer out of habit, then leave it because Sky is your assignment. When the hoist bell rings, the river crew moves as one. You watch the lamps go down and feel the day choose its teams again. Outside, the day runs on math you can see. You set string, drive stakes, square a box of forms until the corners agree, then shovel gravel that sounds like rain when it falls. The timber boss checks plumb with one eye, and a thumb, and grunts when the bubble minds its lane. The air rides clean along your tongue, not polite but complete. At noon you sit on sawhorses with your back to the sun, and the nurse makes her rounds like church, head tipped and to listen, hand steady on the bell. She says the rattle sits lower now, keep to Sky. You nod and chew a biscuit that tastes like food, not arithmetic. A boy from the hill crew wanders over for nails and stays for a story about a fish so big it argued with the pan. Men laugh without spending breath. You mark grade on a lath with carpenter's pencil and smear cedar on your fingers. When the whistle calls you back, the hammer feels honest and your lungs agree. Some work blesses you by being exactly what it says it is. Mid-afternoon, a runner comes from the heading, with a face that won't look at Sky, short-handed. One man down with an ankle, another with ear fever, footage already behind. The foreman points toward the dark and then sees the doctor's letter folded in your pocket like a stop sign. He reads the line again, the one that says no further exposure, and sighs like a man eating beans without salt. He waves you toward the forms and nods to a river barracks man instead. The man ties his rag, says nothing, and steps into the cage like a promise he didn't make. You and the timber boss lift a cap together, both pretending not to watch the lamps drop. The runner departs with your coffee can mister tucked under his arm, as if hope were company property. You let it go. Growl. Gravel rattles. The string hums. Your chest thanks arithmetic for once, then remembers as someone else is paying the bill. Supper turns into triage again. The nurse looks more tired than any man in a clean shirt. She paints throat with iodine for one, counts fever for another, and listens to a chest that gurgles like a kettle someone forgot. She writes silica on a slip and tucks it into a pocket where words go to wait. A boy from the west heading hacks hard enough to wet his handkerchief and then folds the cloth like Sunday. Nobody says blood. The messwoman slides stew refills without asking and sets a heel of bread by the nurse as if kindness were a tool. You hold your bowl with both hands because warmth can be a plan. The foreman eats in the doorway, ledger under his arm, eyes counting spoons and men. Lewis doesn't show. A harmonica starts a hymn and quits after the first line, as if the room already knows the rest. When you stand, the nurse touches your sleeve and says quietly, "Keep to Sky." You say you will and mean it. Night returns with work songs and the other songs. Someone tunes a fiddle until the note stops arguing, then plays something that lets both churches agree. You sit on your bunk, write a short letter that tells the truth without all the pieces. Outside work, sky on the tongue, rain that rinsed the ridge. And you tuck a lemon drop into the fold for your niece because sweetness travels better than worry. The stove ticks down. The building settles. The man above you coughs twice. then rolls and gives the bunk a mercy quiet. You lay the doctor's note under your pillow like a board to spread weight. Breath in, breath out. A pause you dislike. Breath again. You promise to keep stakes straight tomorrow and let the tunnel find other shoulders. Sleep comes in honest pieces, stacked like lumber, with the scarf for a pillow and the letter for a weight. Stormlight walks the ridge before dawn and leaves puddles where tracks argue with the yard. You pull boots that kept their shape and step into a morning that smells of wet creosote and pine gum. The foreman counts crews with his chin and gives you forms to square, stakes to set, braces to drive, work that rewards exact hits more than heroics. You take it. Your chest approves in quiet sentences. Down at the portal, lamps bob into the tunnel like a necklace going where necks don't belong. You look away and plane a sill until the shavings curl like pale fish. By noon the sky washes blue and the nurse's bell finds your ribs less stubborn. She smiles with her eyes and moves on. You split an orange with the Ohio man, and both of you hold the peel to your faces as if citrus could write new lungs. For a minute it almost does. Then the hoist bell rings again, and the day answers in two languages you both understand. Morning lifts clean and then remembers where it is. The yard smells of wet pine, creosote, and coffee you can believe in. You chalk string, set stakes, and square another run of forms while the timber boss hums a tune with no words. Down at the portal, lamps bob like a necklace being swallowed. One bead at a time, steady, stubborn. A runner comes up mid-forenoon with his cap in both hands and a face that doesn't want to say what it knows. Lewis is down with fever, he says, voice flat to keep the day from changing shape. He's on the bench by the powder shed, breathing like a pump that needs packing. You wipe your hands on your trousers and step along the track until you find him under the eave, scarf untied, eyes bright in a way that means wrong. You split your orange and press the slices into his palm. The peel sprays a small brave sun that nobody argues with. He grins one-sided, says it tastes like a holiday, then coughs hard enough to fold himself and hide it. You sit beside him with your back to the shed wall, where powder smells sweet in a tired way. The nurse arrives with her satchel, touches her bell to his ribs, and doesn't move for a long time. Her brow knits a seam you've seen before and never liked. "Yard for a week," she says, loud enough for the foreman 10 feet away to hear without losing face. "Then more if the cough won't mind." The foreman stares past all three of you at the board where footage waits to become numbers. His jaw works, then stops. He nods once, a stingy nod, and turns away like arithmetic hurt him. She gives Lewis a paper-folded small, "Doctor, tomorrow, town, bring your brass check. Keep warm." He tucks it into his shirt as if paper could be a rib. You hand him the last slice and tell him you'll walk him to the bus at dawn. He says he's fine. The word hangs in the air like dust that hasn't decided where to land. Back in the yard, work answers every question by keeping you busy. You drive stakes that bite true, sight string against the far rock, drag a straightage over wet sand until it sings level. A dump rattles and you wheelbarrow gravel along planks slick with yesterday. Your arms burn the honest burn that makes sleep a foregone conclusion. Midday, you and the Ohio man set forms for a culvert mouth. Clamps talking, corners arguing themselves into agreement. Concrete crews come at last with a mixer coughing grey, and you guide the chute while the boss rods the pier with a length of rebar. Bubbles rising like stubborn confessions. You float the surface with a wood screed until it shines dull and promises to remember this shape. Air moves. Not much, not fancy, but enough to remind you your lungs were made for something besides storage. You eat biscuit and cheese on a sawhorse and taste food instead of pennies. For one full minute you forget to listen for your own breath. It's a rich minute. That night, the lawyer holds a meeting in the basement of the hill church where coal, scuttle and hymnals share a shelf. Men sit on folding chairs that wobble, hats folded into boats in their hands. The lawyer says compensation like it could be stacked. He says negligence like it could be measured with a carpenter's square. He names Silica, calls it by its filed name, speaks of tests and letters and pictures that show the white inside a man. Someone asks about the ledger that stops when a signature starts. Someone else asks what a widow gets when a number goes still. The lawyer's hat sits polite on the table. His voice carries and doesn't echo, a skill you envy. He passes a list for names. You print yours in a hand the sorting clerk would respect. A few men sign, and a few fold the paper once and pocket it like a talisman. A few stand and leave because groceries speak louder. When the hymn from upstairs drifts down, it sounds like something tried to climb and chose to stay. Lewis rides to town at dawn while fog keeps its hand on the river. You walk him to the bend where the bus hates the hill and pauses to think. He has the look of someone already halfway gone somewhere, eyes fixed on a middle distance you can't draw a line to. He presses his tobacco tin into your palm. Marbles for the boy, he says, if I forget to come back this week. And you feel the weight of small glass planets rolling against one another. The bus door folds open with a tired clatter. The driver nods, takes the fare, and does not ask questions because questions extend the road. You watch the tail light cough red twice and vanish around the shoulder. The river keeps talking. You pocket the tin, turn back toward the yard, and decide to sharpen every plane blade on the bench, because a sharp edge is one thing in this valley that still obeys. Work finds you ready to be useful. The timber boss trusts you with a layout he usually keeps for himself. String line down, stakes set, grade marked with a cut nail and a steel square. You cut notches with a handsaw that hums when your wrist remembers patience. You and the Ohio man carry a cap together and tip it into place so the posts meet it without complaint. Wedges sing low, the set settles like a stubborn thought deciding to help. The nurse passes with her satchel, slower now, eyes taking inventory of chests the way a farrier listens to hooves. She doesn't stop you today. She doesn't need to. Your breath behaves like a student who finally decided school might be for him. At supper, the mess hall smells of onions, grease, and a mercy you can spoon. A harmonica finds the key that both churches use and sticks to it. You write a short letter for the niece. Marbles incoming, lemon drop still winning, and fold $2 flat inside because sweetness travels better with company. When lights go down, the building breathes and you breathe with it. Not easy, not perfect, but enough. A letter waits at the boarding house desk, your name printed in a hand that tries to be steady. Gawley Bridge postmark. Inside, one sheet from Lewis. Pencil faint where the nurse pressed a blotter to keep it from smearing. He writes like a man measuring boards. The doctor said silicosis, with a mouth that didn't like practice. He spells it once, then crosses the word and writes dust lung, because truth needs both church and kitchen. Orders, weeks outside, maybe a move, no further heading, and a bottle that tastes like licorice and tin. He adds that the lawyer in town talks fast, and the camera that takes chest pictures talks slower and costs more. He tells you not to worry about the gang, they'll make footage, they always do. He asks you to mail the marbles if he forgets. The last line is 3 words. Tell them Sky. You fold the page twice, then smooth it flat the way you would a shirt you mean to wear again. You wrap the tobacco tin in grocery paper and twine, fold corners until the package behaves, and write the address from his letter with block letters the sorting man will respect. The post office smells like varnish, old gum and wet coats. A scale clicks, the clerk names a price, and you count coins into a saucer worn thin by other hands. You slip a lemon drop under the twine because sweetness slips past guards. On the way out, you buy 2 stamps for your own envelope and stand by the window to breathe varnished air. The barber nods from his chair and asks after your friend without making a question out of it. You say doctor's orders and Sky for a while. He says the word like a blessing he remembers from school. Outside, rain takes the dust out of the street and sends it to the river, which is fair. At the yard, a notice goes up on the mess door. Safety talk, all hands. The foreman stands on a crate, the doctor beside him, the nurse near the table with her satchel, and a face that learned patience the hard way. The foreman talks footage first because the board understands that language. Then masks, cotton rags, tied correct, changed often. He holds one up as if it were a miracle and not a scrap. Water on the face? No. Mud slows cars, cars move pay. An engineer raises a sample of duct like a flag and says ventilation will improve when the new fan arrives, which is always very soon. The doctor clears his throat and says, coughs come in winter, but dust helps winter find men. The nurse says wet, once. Quiet, but whole. The crate creaks. A few men tie scarves tighter. A few look at their boots so nobody has to watch their eyes. The talk ends with a hymn number of targets and a promise painted thin. The hoist coughs mid-afternoon and a runner breaks into the yard with his cap crooked and his voice steady because panic is expensive. Roof fall at the west heading, 1 pinned, 2 nicked. Air bad. You and the timber boss grab a stretcher and run the rail, bars over shoulders, timber wedges in a rope sling. Inside the portal, the cold smells like iron and old water. Farther in, it turns to hot pennies and noise. Lamps jitter on the wall. Dust hangs thick enough to feel with your knuckles. The set where it happened leans wrong. Caps split at the pocket. You slide a post, drive a wedge, feel the roof shift like a big animal that finally remembers where its feet go. The pinned man breathes, a ragged saw you can hear over the fan. When the wedge takes, you and 2 others lift rock enough for the timber boss to snake him free. The stretcher rides slow. The tunnel gives you back in short sentences. Outside, the nurse's hands make order faster than words can. Evening finds the mess hall quieter than a good joke. Bowls clink, spoons knock, and the harmonica waits its turn. The Ohio man spreads his hands over a cup and says he's thinking of leaving. When the pour finishes, going back to Rose, he can walk without coughing. He asked what sky tastes like after a month. You say clean and also like work. You talk pay for outside and how coins look smaller when a family's hands are on the table. You both do arithmetic on fingers and shake your heads at the same place in the sum. The nurse walks through with her satchel, listening without asking, counting without writing. She leaves 2 envelopes of powder on the table where the pinned man's crew sits and says rest like she's talking to both lungs and pride. You write to Lewis under the lamplight. Marbles away, yard steady, your church played the same hymn as ours. You sign with your number because names vanish faster here. Sunday brings a picnic the women from town invent and the camps let happen. Coffee in enamel cups, stew ladled into bowls that used to know nails, a table of cornbread that tastes like the week forgot to be mean. Children chase along the cinders until a mother's whistle pulls them back from the tracks. A boy with a cap too big for his head dumps his marble bag into the dust and begs someone to draw a circle. You turn a screw in your pocket and make one with its head gentle. He plays ringer, thumb true, knuckle on dirt, glass planets clacking soft as rain. You lean and show him how to hold the shooter low, palm steady, wrist quiet. He wins his cousin's blue swirl and looks at you like you bent physics. The river moves past with its own patience. You sit on a timber and eat a slice of pie somebody handed you, and think about a bus moving toward a town that can spell your friend's sickness. Evening slides in without drama. You breathe. It holds. Monday walks in clear and keeps its coat on. The yard smells of damp pine, sun on creosote, and coffee that tastes like someone believed in it. You string a line from hub to stake and the chalk snaps a blue that looks like reason. The timber boss checks plumb with one eye. You notch a sill until the saw forgets to chatter. A runner from town brings mail folded small. Lewis's hand looks thinner on paper. He says the doctor showed him a picture that looked like winter in tree. Only inside. No more heading, no stairs, no hurry. He'll rest at his cousin's for a spell and write when breath learns to listen. He adds a line about the marbles arriving safe and a boy who holds the blue swirl like a world. You fold the letter twice and tuck it behind the lining of your cap, a place clean enough for news. The river argues with rocks in the ordinary way. Your lungs do their work without writing complaints in the margins. That counts as grace. Sunday you ride a bus to town with a pocket of coins and an orange because habit likes citrus. The road leans and then settles. The river runs beside like a friend with advice. At the clinic, the hall smells of carbolic and pencil shavings. Lewis sits on a bench with a blanket around his shoulders and eyes that learn to save motion for breathing. The nurse nods you in and leaves you both a room long enough to act like men. He taps his chest once, a quiet admission, and smiles that one-sided smile. The doctor says he can stay where air moves and strength might move with it. And the picture isn't friendly, but it speaks plain. You split the orange. The peel bites bright. He eats slow as a prayer. He takes off his scarf, silk gone soft from trying, and presses it into your hand. "Tell them sky," he says again, like it's a line from a hymn you both forgot. You promise because the word fits. Back at the site, a fan finally arrives, big as a stubborn horse and painted promise grey. Men in clean coveralls bolt it to a frame and spin it up while everyone watches as if wind were a miracle you could turn on. The first gust shoves a ribbon of air down the tin duct and makes the canvas sleeves kick. Closer to the mouth, you feel it on your cheek like a handshake. At the face, it thins to a rumour that still helps. Dust lifts slower, hovers dull instead of glittering like a lie. The foreman chalks footage with a voice that almost softens. Rags still tie across noses, and a coffee can still rides a hose in one heading until mud complains. The river crew files in with the calm of men who know improvements come with teeth. You haul lagging for the adit sets, shoulders grateful for sunlight, while the fan hums its arithmetic. A breeze is not a cure, but a day can be less cruel while you count. Nights grow patient in small ways. You whittle a ring for a marble game out of a scrap of barrel hoop, sanding the edge with brick until it stops snagging skin. The harmonica leans into a tune that skips the sad notes without lying about them. You sit by the open window, spoon for a prop, and breathe air that remembers trees. The building speaks in polite ticks. Your chest still clears its throat after stairs, but doesn't drag a nail across bone now. You write a letter without crossing anything out. Yard steady, form square. A bluebird near the rail again, and a fan that talks like work. You slip a lemon drop into the fold because your niece is building an army of small suns. When the lamp goes low, the dark isn't an enemy, it's just the room saying hush. You lie on your back and count breaths like fence posts, stopping when you realise the line holds. Sleep arrives without negotiating every board first. News walks like it has time and then doesn't. A cross goes up on the thin hill by the bend, plain wood, no paint. The preacher speaks short sentences that land where they need to. Men from the river barracks stand in coats that don't fit the weather, hats in hands, eyes on a place that felt temporary and decided to be permanent. Nobody says the word fast, but you think it anyway. After, the mess hall sets out stew and biscuits and calls it community. The nurse folds 2 slips into 2 pockets and rubs her temple like the arithmetic of lungs has worn the pencil down. You bring her a cup of coffee and she smiles through it tired. The Ohio man says the poor finishes next week and rows of corn don't argue like rock. He holds the idea the way a man holds a handle he trusts. You pull Lewis's letter from your cap, read "Tell them sky" again, and put the words where they do not have to work. Paper has its own weight, and you lift it. At the Hill Church basement, the lawyer sits with his hat on the table and a pencil that doesn't click. He asks for names, times, jobs, and what the air felt like when the bit sugar. You tell him, because telling is a job you can do without stealing breath from forms or friends. He writes your number neat. He asks for the doctor's sentence. You slide the letter, the one with no further exposure stamped into its back like a brand. He explains how paper stacks into judgments slower than dust stacks into chests. He doesn't promise anything except that stories count. You sign again, block letters a clerk would trust, and pocket a copy that smells like ink and the chance of a future footnote. Outside, the river wears afternoon light like a coat it can afford. You walk back to the yard and pick up your hammer. The line hums. The stake bites. The sky answers like a door that wasn't locked after all. The yard folds you into its steady grammar, while the river crew rotates men for breath. You haul lagging to the adit and pass boards to a line of hands that work like one body. Brown palms, pale palms, all with dust tattooed where creases used to be. A young man from the barracks, hat brim crushed flat by habit, asks for your square and returns it cleaned with a swipe of his sleeve. You trade a nail pouch for his better hammer, because tools pass easier than opinions. When a set goes up true, he taps the cap twice and you answer with a nod that means more than talk. At break, he shows a creased pocket picture of a boy by a porch rail, holding a cat that looks unimpressed. You show him a lemon drop wrapped in paper and say, "Children think it is sunshine you can keep." For a minute, both of you hold proof that Air has other jobs. Dusk brings a service in the hill church that does not bother to separate doors. Benches fill with coats that don't match, boots lined with the same fatigue, hats folded into quiet. The preacher keeps his sentences plain and leaves room between them for breath. He names 3 men gone since last frost, then lets the room supply the rest because the ledger is longer than his voice. A hymn starts in one corner and grows until it finds the ceiling. You hear the river in it, and the hoist, and the fan that now thumps like a tired heart doing its duty. After, the mess hall sets stew and cornbread and nobody charges. Children trail biscuits along the table until hands steer them towards some bowls. You pass your lemon drops to a girl with a braid tight as twine, and she pockets one like treasure. Outside, the ridge holds the last light, as if there might be more if it tried. You walk back slow, lungs measuring the hill in small, honest sums. On Sunday, you take your scrap hoop and brick and sand the edge until it stops catching skin, then draw a circle in cinders behind the boarding house. A cluster of boys appears the way swallows do, all motion and opinion. You show knuckle down, thumb set, shooter low, eye soft. You lose the first 2 on purpose and the third by accident, which they enjoy more. The blue swirl from Lewis's parcel shows up in a palm like a planet. You teach its owner to let go at the last blink, not the one before. He wins it back from a cousin and grins at the sky like he built it. A woman at the pump watches, arms crossed, mouth softened by the sight of rules that don't harm. You pocket your shooter when the game is done, wipe your hands and breathe a minute under nothing heavier than a clothesline. The hoop lies on the dirt like a small boundary that decided to be kind. You step over it and the day steps with you. A letter comes Monday from the town with the clinic. Lewis's hand shakier and no less particular. He writes from his cousin's porch where the window stays open, and the doctor insists on chairs, not stairs. He says the picture shows white where air should be eased, and the word on paper looks like a fence. He tells you the boy carries the blue swirl in his pocket like a talisman, and has already lost it twice and found it twice, which is how luck learns men. He encloses 2 stamps and a folded silk scrap, snipped from the scarf you carry. A patch for your cap lining, he says, because a man should keep some softness where his thoughts live. He adds a line about oranges. Peel them slow, let the spray sting the knuckles, call it medicine even when it isn't. At the bottom he writes, "Stubborn toward air," which you read out loud once before you fold the page along the old crease. Work gives you a helper fresh from a mill town that fed him cotton dust and called it dinner. You show him string and stake, hub and tack, square and plumb. You let him drive the first nail long so he can feel the way wood answers when it approves. At the adit, you teach how caps sit happy when wedges sing low, how a post that leans will spend your sleep like a thief. When he asks about heading, you tell him the truth you can afford. The fans help, the rags help, water helps until mud forgets manners, and some rock is a liar that writes its name in your chest. He looks at your scarf and then down at the sky, and chooses to ask about concrete instead. You show him how to rod the pour, how to float the surface until it holds its shape, how to read a board by the way it warps when weather argues. By noon his breathing sounds like work and not warning, and that is a lesson you're proud to give. Night falls with the soft thud of something setting in its right place. You sit at the window with the spoon propping the sash and the silk scrap stitched into your cap like a private flag. The harmonica tries a tune and actually finishes. The stove ticks down without complaint. Your chest clears itself after the stairs and then minds its business. You untie the scarf, fold it into a square, and lay it on the table beside the doctor's letter and the lawyer's card, 3 small papers that point in different directions and still agree on the shape of a life. Outside, the river walks by with its big shoulders and leaves you to your smaller ones. You count breaths without panic and stop counting because the line holds. You tell the empty room again what you promised. You will keep to sky and you will tell them. Then you set the lamp low, slide under the blanket, and let sleep arrive like it belongs to you. Inspection day smells like starch and ink. A car from town noses up the track and produces men whose shoes don't understand mud. They bring a photographer with a flash that startles even the gorge. Clean rags appear from a crate, folded like napkins, and the foreman ties one on a volunteer to show how proper protection looks when sunlight is watching. The new fan hums behind them, promise grey, as if it were part of the costume. Someone arranges a shot at the portal, lamps high, faces clear, rags knotted into neat. Coughing. "Progress," the man says, as though the word were currency. The nurse stands off to the side with her satchel and a mouth that has learned quiet in self-defence. The engineer speaks of airflow and efficiency. His chalk lines stay white even when he gestures near mud. You keep your cap low, your hammer on your shoulder, and your breath steady. The camera's eye blinks. The moment freezes. Then it melts, and men go back to work that pays in dollars and lungs. Forms want attention, not speeches. You show the new helper how to set chairs for bar, how tie wire twists with a short wrist and a small click that tells you it's holding. Gravel rattles into the trench and you level it with a rake until the sound changes from little rivers to a single shore. The mixer coughs grey batter that smells like wet stone and old plans. You guide the chute, signal slow with 2 fingers, then float the pour with a board you planned yourself. The surface answers by smoothing into a dull shine that promises to remember. You teach him to rod deep, to lift bubbles until they die easy. He learns quick. His breathing stays the right kind of loud. The timber boss checks edges with a glance and grunts approval, which is how he says thank you. When the screed finally sings the long note, you step back and watch water sheen and then leave, a small procession going nowhere you can see. Lewis writes again from the cousin's porch, pencil lighter, sentences still square. He encloses a small bird he whittled from a scrap of apple limb, wings folded, beak up like it knows where weather lives. For your pocket, he writes, so you remember sky even when you're busy. He adds a line about counting, breathe into 5, hold 1, out to 6. Small math that steadies the rails inside a man. The bird fits under your thumb and warms fast the way small truths do. You show it to the helper and tell him a friend sent it so you don't forget to look up. He turns it in his palm and returns it carefully, as if wood could bruise. You tuck it beside the lawyer's card and the doctor's note, a flock made of paper and patience. That evening you write back, the fan helps, the yard holds, the boys play marbles behind the house and shout like happiness was a job. You underline 3 words, stubborn toward air. You climb the thin hill at dusk and stand among crosses that keep their own books. The grass here is short because boots have taught it manners. Someone has wedged a smooth stone under one cross to stop the wobble. Someone else has left half a biscuit wrapped in paper that survived the rain. You lay a lemon drop on a rail post because sweetness ought to visit. A wind walks the ridge and tastes of river and pine smoke. 2 truths that agree about very little. Down by the track, 2 kids scratch a ring in cinders and argue over knuckles. The cat judges form from the porch step like it owns the rulebook. You touch one cross, then another, and recite numbers because the board uses them and sometimes names run thin. Tell them sky, you say, quiet enough to be a promise. The bird in your pocket presses your leg like a reminder gentle enough to keep. Storm afternoon turns the gorge into a kettle. The river lifts its shoulders and comes for the lower yard, brown water licking at the plank walk and then remembering appetite. You and the river crew fill bags with sand that used to be beach and now remembers work. Hands pass them along the line, hip to hip, a human belt that doesn't break. The helper stumbles once and laughs, then doesn't stumble again. You brace forms with extra diagonal, drive spikes until your wrist buzzes, shout count, and hear the replies come back clean. The fan hums over a puddle like a thing that intends to live. Rain nails the roof and then softens. The water noses the bags, thinks better, and walks away muttering. When it's done, everyone leans against something that will hold and tries a breath together. You pass 2 oranges down the line, parcelling out slices like small wages. No app, just shovels. Someone laughs into his scarf and pockets the rind for luck. Night owns the boarding house but rents you a corner. You sit with the window propped by the faithful spoon and spread the doctor's note, the lawyer's card, and the small wooden bird where lamplight can be polite. The helper lingers in the doorway with a question he tries to make smaller. Do you ever go back? And he asks, meaning the heading and not the past. You tell him the truth you have, sometimes once when need asks, mostly no when paper learns to speak, never again if lungs get a vote. He nods like a student who hears the lesson the first time, because he plans to keep the job and his breath both. You write a letter for your niece, a short piece about marbles, rain, and a cat who knows rules. Then one for Lewis. The fan is real wind, the hill holds steady, the bird sits in your pocket and minds you. You bank the lamp, fold the papers, and sleep arrives without bargaining, a plain gift in a plain room. The helper shows up early with a lunch pail that rattles like optimism. You hand him the chalk line and let him snap the first blue across forms, dust blooming, string humming. He grins because lines answer, unlike bosses or weather. You set chairs, twist tie wire with the little click that says it will hold, then cite the grade to a hub you set yesterday. The timber boss checks without saying he is, one eye narrowed, thumb lifting, and grunts when the bubble obeys. Across the yard, a boy from the river barracks lifts lagging with a pace that would shame clocks. You trade him a nail bar for a moment and he hands it back like a friend. The fan down in the portal thumps its steady hymn, and even the gorge nods along. You breathe, and the air goes where it belongs without first asking who you voted for. It's a small miracle you don't name out loud. At break, you take your pocket knife to a scrap slat and carve a flat boat for the boys who haunt the pump. The helper watches and learns the trick of shaving thin, how grain likes kindness, how corners soften when you rub them with dust and spit. A girl in a red ribbon asks if the boat will float in a puddle, and you tell her yes if she talks nice to it. She does, it does. A small parade starts along the plank walk, a fleet headed for the biggest puddle, and the mess hall woman laughs into her apron. You peel an orange slow and let the spray sting the cracked skin at your knuckles. The helper winces, then tries it and calls it medicine, which it is in the ways that matter. A man from the west heading passes with his rag tied tight and nods without stopping. You tuck half the orange into his palm and he tucks thanks into his eyes where words won't waste air. The lawyers' meeting moves to the boarding house stoop because July forgets about basements. He reads a draft that strings names together like fence wire. He says affidavits, depositions, testimony. Long words that sound like boards laid end to end. Men listen because listening is cheaper than stopping. A woman from town sits with a tablet, neat handwriting that will outlast some voices. You describe the dry cut, the sugar seam, the glow of faces under mica lamps, the way water makes peace for 3 holes and war for wheels. The helper asks what to tell when he's old, and someone calls these days progress. You say tell them the air made choices, and so did men. The lawyer nods as if you filed something important. When the paper passes to sign, hands hesitate, then move. Some don't. The stoop holds all of a set without comment. You tuck your signature behind your brass number and breathe out like you put down a bar. Late afternoon, a rel kicks and kisses a shin. The helper hisses, laughs, then stops laughing when the skin shows its red idea of a lesson. You sit him on a crate, rinse with kettle water, hold his boot heel in your palm and talk him through the sting like you're timing a fuse. The nurse snips a strip of clean from her bag and paints iodine that smells like discipline. Change the wrap after supper, she orders, and he nods like he passed a test. You teach him to check the flange on the wheel that bit him, and how to sweet-talk rails straight with bar and patience. He says he'll remember. You say the rail will too. He laughs for real this time, and you find yourself smiling because teaching costs less than worry and pays incompetence. When the whistle blows, he's walking level again and your chest hasn't written any complaints in the margins. Evening cools the ridge and stretches the day into something almost tender. You sit by the open window with a spoon bracing the sash and sew the silk scrap into your cap, lining with clumsy stitches that still hold. The bird Lewis carve presses your pocket like a private handshake. You unfold his last letter and read the line about counting, breathe to 5, hold 1, out to 6, then try it with the window air. It fits like a tool that remembers the hand. The harmonica finishes a tune instead of quitting halfway. Somebody cheers softly as if a secret got told right. You write a short note back, yard steady, helper learns quick, boat floated in the puddle, and the girl claimed the ocean, and underline stubborn toward air until the pencil digs the paper. When the lamp lowers, your lungs stay calm enough to ignore them. Sleep arrives like a good foreman, says very little, expects the job to happen, and leaves you be. Sunday wears its clean shirt even when it's frayed. Church doors both open, hymns travelling and friendly arguments on the breeze. After, a baseball game invents itself in the cinders, a broom handle for a bat, a ball that used to be string, bases made from old gloves. You umpire because breath makes a poor left fielder. The river gang swings easy and laughs when the ball finds someone's cap brim. The hillmen jaw and smile and steal second when nobody watches. A fly tips off the bat and arcs toward the pump. The girl in the red ribbon snags it two-handed and stares like she surprised physics. Everybody hollers the right kind of loud. You pass a lemon drop to the catcher, and he pockets it like a signed contract. When shadows get long, people drift towards supper, like iron finds a magnet. You stand a minute alone by the pump, feeling the breeze go. Work offers the medicine it knows. Measurable tasks. You snap line, set stake, plumb post, rod paw, float surface. The screed sings when you load it right, and you can soon feel the finish through the handle as the stone settles into its permanent idea. The helper learns to listen for bubbles dying. He grins when the board leaves a dull sheen behind that looks both calm and sure. The timber boss trusts him with a corner, and trusts you to watch without stealing breath. A boy from the river barracks brings lagging up on one shoulder. No show in it. And you trade places so his lungs can meet daylight for 5 minutes. He stands with you and says nothing and thanks you as if he did. A fan down in, then the hole kicks up a notch and the duct flutters. A small stubborn wind touches your cheek and then forgets you. It still counts. A letter arrives from Lewis's cousin in a hand that leans forward like it's catching a bus. He rests, she writes, in a chair near the window. Some afternoons he counts trains by their whistle. He asks after the river. He says to tell you that the blue swirl plays fair if the circle is true. She encloses a pressed clover that didn't win the argument with the envelope. You slide it under your cap lining and decide superstition is just hope with pockets. That night you teach the helper the marble ring again. Thumb steady. Eye soft. Let go at the last blink. He misses twice, learns. Then knocks a cat eye clean and looks surprised. You say physics likes attention. He says maybe it likes luck. You both agree luck prefers men who keep their knuckles down. Storms come early and quick, like arguments that start midway through. You brace formwork with a diagonal that looks too much and saves a corner. The river noses the yard and stops, thinking. The fan hums steady. The portal smokes with warm breath. The nurse ties her hair up with a strip of muslin and works another hour without saying so. A quitting whistle, the sky tears open and forgives heat for a minute. You stand under the eave and breathe the kind of air that rinses. The helper asks, half joking, if this is what the new world feels like now. You say it feels like a good idea that remembers it's also a job. You walk back to the house with your cap low and the bird in your pocket, and you think about a porch 2 towns over where a friend counts trains and names weather like it's family. You promise him again what he asked, tell them sky. August kneels on your shoulders and asks for rent. The yard smells of hot creosote and pine sap that thinks about sugar. You set stakes in soil that learn to be stubborn. The hammer sends a clean argument up your wrist and your elbow agrees to translate. The helper snaps line with confidence now, blue chalk rising like a reasonable ghost. Down by the gate a man sells either by the chunk, wrapped in sawdust. You just buy a piece for the water barrel and watch it hiss down into a memory of winter. The nurse salts her hat brim, laughs once without sound, and pockets the change you swear you gave her last week, because apparently you did. She listens to your chest and raises her eyebrows as if to say the lesson is holding. Keep to sky, she says anyway, because repetition is a kind of gentleness. A white envelope with a typed line finds the boarding house. Acknowledgement of receipt. Case number. Please do not expect prompt resolution. The lawyer writes smaller. We keep pushing. You fold both papers until they fit under the bird where wood remembers. The helper asks if paper helps at all. You tell him it makes people write their names near what they've done. Sometimes that's the start of a road, sometimes just a fence you walk along and curse. He nods and hands you a rag wet from the barrel without being asked. You tie it under your cap brim until your face remembers kindness. In the mess hall, someone reads a newspaper about dams and jobs and men with shovels who will move hills. The room listens like it wants to, then returns to stew because supper solves more problems than speeches. You take a day and ride 2 towns over, where Lewis sits in a chair angled exactly at the window, a blanket across his knees even in heat. He smiles with one side of his mouth and holds out both hands like a trick that still works. You talk about ordinary things because important ones already learn to stand quietly. The fan, the helper, the bird that reminds pockets of trees. He says the doctor reads pictures like weather maps, and some storms linger. He says the boy still loses the blue swirl and finds it in the same hour. You split an orange and count with him, 5 in, hold 1, 6 out, until the rhythm stands by itself. He closes his eyes and names freight by the whistle, getting 3 right and 2 so close you want to lie. When you leave, he laughs at your hat and tells you your stitches look like a straight road. Tell them, he says, because habits can be promises too. Back at the yard, the helper owns the corner you gave him. He sets chairs, ties wire, rods the paw, and checks the sheen with a carpenter's eye that grew extra truth. The timber boss trusts him with a wedge and a cap and listens for the note that rides his hammer, not yours. You step back, watch without stealing, and feel a quiet pride that does not need applause. The river crew rotates men from face to sky with a new rule nobody wrote down, but everyone follows. The foreman sees it, pretends he invented it, and you don't mind because some ideas survive better when a man like him adopts them. The nurse rests her satchel on the stoop for a minute, hand at the small of her back, then stands again and gets on with it. You carry the satchel across the yard. She lets you. Evening slow in a way you once didn't trust. You sit at the window with the spoon and sew more silk into your cap because softness begets softness. The harmonica learns a quieter song and finishes it twice. The helper leans in the doorway and asks how long you'll keep to sky. You tell him as long as lungs vote, and they do whenever a man listens. He says he might send for his sister to come up from the mill town if there's work that doesn't taste like thread. You say the yard always needs hands that keep corners true. He nods and tries the marble ring again in the cinders. He misses, grins, then sinks one and grins bigger. You pour 2 tin cups of coffee that taste like someone meant them to. The ridge swallows the last light with good manners. You breathe without counting and feel extravagant. A day after rain, the gorge smells like wet iron and basil someone crushed by mistake. You walk the thin hill at dusk and read crosses by thumb and thought. Someone has carved a name where chalk used to sit. Someone else left a blue ribbon on a nail that won't hold it long. You place a lemon drop on a post. It will draw ants by morning, and a child will still call it treasure. Down below, boys run a base path between shadows. A cat judges, and a woman hangs shirts that drip clean water back into dirt that will forget. You press the bird in your pocket and whisper the line that followed you here. Dust moves faster than doctors. Then the other one, the one you owe. Tell them sky. Both are true, both live in the same mouth. You stand until the ridge agrees you can go. September learns to be kind in the mornings. The yard wears dew like coin silver, and your boots take it careful. You chalk a neat blue across forms that will outlast some names. The helper sets chairs and talks about sending for his sister. Now that corners make sense and the nurse thinks sky is a reasonable prescription. Down at the portal, a new crew steps off the truck with eyes that haven't learned our distance yet. You meet them at the gate with the same sentence you give everyone who still believes in courage without rules. Tie the rag, keep the water at hand, count your holes, respect the afterfall, and if a man tells you to step back, do it and argue later. One boy nods like memorizing, another rolls his shoulders like he already knows. You had the quiet part. Tell the nurse the truth. The law might be slow, but lies are slower. The foreman walks past and doesn't correct you, which is his way of permission. A letter from Lewis shrinks to a card with big letters that do the work quickly. Porch, window, trains, sky. It's enough. He encloses a scrap of a map torn from an old magazine. A river drawn like a lazy snake and a dot for a town nobody visits on purpose. You tape it inside your trunk where shirts live and breathe once like that could fix anything. The helper brings you a photograph he bought from the man who visited with shoes that hated mud. A line of men at the portal with rags knotted neat. The fan behind them, the duct like a tame serpent. You look for yourself and find only a cap brim and a hand on a hammer. You look for the boy who danced rails and find a blur that could be anyone. You put the picture under the map because both are honest and neither tells the whole truth. Work turns into teaching without a bell. You watch the helper notch a sill with a saw that learned his patience. You correct with your thumb, not your mouth. He checks plumb, you nod before the bubble settles. The timber boss trusts you both with a run that would have belonged to older hands last winter. Down by the adit, the river crew sets a cap in time with him, only they hear. You carry wedges, they carry the rest. At lunch, you pass orange slices down the track like ideas, and everyone agrees peel smells like medicine even when it's just fruit. The nurse pauses by your bench and says your lungs sound like they remember their job. You say thank you without saying you still count when you climb stairs. Counting is a habit now, not a fear. Evening brings a letter from the lawyer, with words that taste like sawdust and small victories. A hearing scheduled in a town with a courthouse that still believes wood polish means law, names to be called, testimony to be gathered, a chance to say dry cut in a room where pens do not forgive. You practice sentences without poetry, you strip them of the flower nobody asked for, and keep only verbs that lift, carry, bite, settle, cough, drown, bury. The helper asks if you're nervous, you say no, and mean yes, and both can be true because lungs taught you that. You tuck the letter under your cap lining and the bird feels jealous for a minute, then not. You write to Lewis. We'll speak. I'll say your name without saying it. They'll hear it anyway. On Saturday, you set the hoop for marbles and draw a ring with a nail head just deep enough for them to hold rules. The boys argue like they invented physics. The girl in the red ribbon breaks a 3-shot run and announces she's opening a bank. You let her. The helper watches, amused and solemn at once, because some games are instruction letters disguised as fun. You show knuckle down one more time, thumb set, eye soft, let go on the last blink. He sinks the blue swirl, on loan for the day, and holds it up like weather he made. Adults clap without making a scene of it. The mess hall woman brings out pie because the week didn't kill anybody, which is sometimes the only measure a place needs. You eat your slice slow, and let the crust talk to your teeth about patience. The ridge accepts dusk again like it got invited. Night comes cleaner now that windows stay propped and fans work like they're trying to be moral. You lie with the spoon doing its dependable job, and the silk inside your cap warm from your hair. You breathe 5 in, hold 1, 6 out, and you fall asleep at 6 because that is how softness works when you finally let it. Before you go, you promise the dark a small honesty. If the yard outlives you, let it be because you taught a boy to keep corners square and to step back when a man says step. If the law outlives you, let your number be a name for a minute. If the river outlives everyone, let it remember the lemon drops. The bird in your pocket learns the shape of your hand and decides it can rest. If you made it to this porch, to this window, to this fan that hums steady even when math and men don't, you already know the trick. You don't need speeches about bravery. You need hands that show you how to tie the rag, how to read the face, how to count ties backward when the fuse hisses like a snake that learned manners from nobody. You need someone to say the quiet rules out loud. Tell the nurse the truth, wet the scarf, step back when a palm says back, write your number neat on paper that will outlive you. Teach the new ones the same. If you enjoy this kind of misery dressed as history, you already clicked what needed clicking. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me if the river in your town smells like pine or pennies. Then tuck your cap under your bed and keep a lemon drop for luck. We're almost done. You've got breath to spare. Bend it gentle. Now, walk with me one last lap past the portal and the picture in the office of men with clean rags for the camera. Past the hoist that coughs like a church stove. Past the wash barrels, oil first, soap second, sawdust third, rinse fast, spit grey, call it good. Past the mess hall where stew and cornbread made treaties the law couldn't write. Past the nurse's satchel and the doctor's bell, past the lawyer's hat and the pencil that refused to click even when it wanted to. Past the hill church that borrowed a hymn from the river and the river that borrowed patience from the hill. Past the board that chalked our days into numbers and forgot to keep names. Past the small hill where crosses stand and keep books in a language wind knows. Take it in, don't look away. Looking away is how dust wins. You remember the first bite of the jack, how powder leaped, how sugar flashed in the lamp beam like treasure with an agenda. You remember finned rock and crooked rails that argued for attention. You remember men who could catch a coupler with 2 fingers and not pinch them. You remember a boy dancing a rail, a grin under grey, and a bus that carved morning in half. You remember a doctor who could read pictures and a nurse who could read men. You remember a fan that tried to be moral and sometimes succeeded. You remember your own chest turning from storage back into lungs. You remember a carved bird that warmed to your palm and didn't ask for anything back except breath. Here is the last instruction that matters. Keep to sky when sky will have you. If you must go under with water in the can and a partner who listens. Tie the rag even when no one is watching. Step back when a hand opens. Count your holes, respect the afterfall, and give the roof the extra wedge because wedges are cheaper than funerals. Send money home and lemon drops besides. Sign your name where paper needs witnesses. If a man asks you what to tell his boy, say, keep the circle true, knuckle down, let go at the last blink. If a man asks what to tell his lungs, say, you're owed work that doesn't argue with breath. We end quiet because loud never helped lungs. The mess hall is cooled. The stove ticks like it forgave someone. The harmonica finished a tune with all the sad notes in it and nobody needed to clap. The helper, no longer a word that means new, checks the braces on the form you set together and doesn't need your nod. The nurse folds her satchel and stretches her back. Someone brings her pie without asking. The foreman chalks tomorrow's targets in smaller numbers than last winter. The river slides past with shoulders that know both work and mercy. You stand at the window with the spoon in its old job, and the silk in your cap warm as a thought. You breathe 5 in, hold 1, 6 out, repeat until the world decides to sleep with you. And now, lay down. You're in a room that holds the day without arguing it. The bird in your pocket knows your hand and doesn't worry anymore. The map in your trunk stays taped where you left it. The picture of men with clean rags can sit face down tonight. The porch 2 towns over has a chair that still points at weather, and a friend who counts trains without counting the rest. Tell them sky when you wake, if anyone asks. Tell them dust moves faster than doctors and ask them to build slower anyway. Close your eyes. The fan hums a small stubborn lullaby. The ridge leans close like a careful friend. Breath in, breath out. Gain, let sleep come and keep coming, plain as work, soft as mercy, steady as river until morning.